I have learned through moderating which people have a backbone and which people don't. And I don't want to be that guy, but I'm going to be that guy. If I was in the audience, I probably would have called the cops during this debate to do a wellness check on Destiny, just to make sure he didn't do anything to himself, because this is just terrible, man. This is sad.
I don't think you've let me finish a single thing, so I have very little sympathy for you at this point.
Destiny's handling this poorly. Well, Destiny, there's no way to handle this, like, in a good way, because Nico's just gonna yell. Like, let's say, like, Dylan, you're not debating very well, and I'm like, so my position is, and the other person's like, pause, unlimited funding, CIA, and I'm like, anyway, what I was trying to say, dude, this moderator is look, he's smiling. This little coward is smiling. Let's get into this. So, I did not get to go down to Texas for this. Number one, I did not want to go to Texas, so it's a W on my part. But number two, I do kind of wish that I was able to go. But, you know, I already went to Freer Fest. I already had to go through the big kerfluffle of driving all the way to Tennessee. I didn't want to put down all the money for the plane tickets. So I was like, screw it. And if I'm not going there to speak, I don't really know how much I really want to go. Not really worth it, in my opinion, if I'm going to be putting down that kind of money. So I decided not to go. But Destiny, Shark Zero, Merrick, I think Socialism Done Left, Peter Coffin, Nico House, Sansol, all of these people did go and engaged in some way, either in the audience. I think Shark Zero went into the, I think it was the Texas State Assembly, and then yelled, "Where is Ted Cruz?" and then got kicked out of the Texas State Assembly for yelling into Texas State Assembly. Jangles also went, that is correct. And anyway, I wanted to watch this one. Now, the reason why I want to watch this one in particular is because, well, how do I put this? I find Nico House fascinating, just because he is in a very small section of the left that is fascinating to me, because on one hand, he wants to do all the research possible, and he does research online, but then he also makes sure to make sure that all of his sources, all combined, are from the least reputable organizations on the planet. And he chooses the least reputable politicians to support, like Tulsi Gabbard. And then, when he's wrong, he'll just never walk it back, on Tulsi Gabbard, right? Actually, maybe he did walk it back on Tulsi Gabbard. Does anybody know if Nico House ever was like, never mind about Tulsi, I was wrong? Because at this point, even if he could ignore the homophobia, or the transphobia, or her weird obsession with CRT and the Virginia race, even though that's one of the least important issues when it comes to actually what matters in Virginia. Or, I don't know, most certainly when she talked about drones after the drone strikes in Afghanistan, he must have turned around eventually. Right? On Tulsi? As far as I know, he hasn't dumped Tulsi yet. But I'm excited to see Destiny engage specifically with Nico, because I find Nico particularly to be frustrating on the internet. I saw his debate with Jangles. He was fun. And I think I saw him at the September 18th protest. I swore to God, I looked at the clothes he was wearing, and I looked at him, and I was like, those clothes, that face, that has to be Nico House. I thought it was Nico House. And I think later he said he was at the September 18th protest, so I think I missed him. I just didn't walk up and say hi to him. I was nervous because I didn't want to walk up to Nico House and be like, "Yo, you're Nico House," and be like, "No, I'm just some other black man," and be like, well, there's me, but I'm pretty sure that was him. Anyway, let's go watch this.
You don't want it so that anytime somebody posts something
So this was the event Destiny is ducking you for? Yeah, CTV, this is the event he ducked you for.
On your website, you can get sued for what another user uploads on your site. If that is the case,
that's not what we're talking
about. That absolutely
really
is what
just
you're talking about.
These really?
Yes, really, yeah.
Yes, according. So let's hear why they don't have to be neutral.
Because that's the law. You're not obligated. There is no we just talked about the First Amendment. If you started a private platform, a really good question, in my opinion, is why the fuck was Facebook allowed to buy Instagram? That shit is crazy to me. This is one of those things that seems plainly obvious unless you're taking a hardcore political bend to it. If you have a platform and you
motherfuckers did not like. Ultimately, I'm gonna have to side with Nico on this.
Our speakers. He's been featured in the New York Times and his famous Twitch streamer, Stephen Bonnell. the queen of controversial conversations, Ariel Scorsella.
Ariel Scorsella, she's the online, I really don't know what to call her besides she's the online lesbian. And the reason I call her that is because her most popular videos are specifically her talking about lesbian sex, and how she's a lesbian that supports the right wing and the LGBT that's a right winger, and people need to be more accepting of right wing LGBT. And like, if you look at her most like popular videos, I'm not saying this because she's a lesbian and right wing, she promotes it like that. Ariel Scarsella, I forget how to say it. Stella, I have no shot. Oh, no shot. I got it right. If you go to her videos, let's go to most popular. It's gonna be why I left the left, and it's gonna be like, dude, stop doing this to women in bed. Her and another woman. Her and vagina. Gay guy shows lesbian his penis. Straight girls explain penetration for an oral. Bi-curious girls. Is my vagina ugly? Never do this to a vagina. Scissoring versus tripping. Like, finger. Ariel's. Women taste test their own vaginas. Do lesbians have threesomes? Duh. It's like, it's all like lesbian content, right? And then like eventually she just was like, now I'm leaving the left, everyone. Why I left the left? And then it was lesbian content combined with right-wing content. So when I say she's like the right-wing lesbian, that's how she advertises her. It'd be like if every video I put out, it was like, queer person reacts, queer person, this queer person, then you'd be like, oh yeah, he's like the queer lefty, which I would say is like saying, oh my gosh, it's the queer lefty, is not going to make immediately everybody think, oh, Dylan Burns, right? Because there's a lot of queer lefties. But I think that's also why there's such a market for the lesbian right-winger. Anonymous Gifter, thanks for giving the tier 1 sub to the online lesbian.
Yeah, that's fine. Or whichever, that's fine. And worldwide renowned political shit talker Nico House. An author and video
By the way, like, Nico House shit talking online isn't that good, okay? It's literally like, fuck you, corporate hack. I think it's lib shit, or what's the one? The shit lib is the one they throw around like all the time. And like just like getting angry at people. It's not like like good political shit talking. Like, you could say that Trump is a good political shit talker. I despise Trump. Great political shit talker. Nico, I wouldn't particularly think Nico is a great one.
Peter Coffin.
The patriotic communist. All right. By the way, was Peter Coffin? I don't think Peter Coffin was directly mentioned as those patriotic socialists who were kicked out of or stopped from going into CPUSA. I think it was just Haas and Caleb Maupin, I believe. But Peter Coffin was included in the art about it.
Welcome to Better Discourse. I'm your moderator, Brian Edward. And today our panel is Democracy Dies with Dorsey.
You know what? I'm actually sad that I know all these people. The fact that I know Destiny, Ariel Scarsella, Nico House, and Peter Coffin has officially like let me know that I'm too online. I'm now terminally online. The fact that I know all these people.
That's meant to be a little bit funny because some of that censorship is coming from social media. But I did hear the quote, "When you tear out a man's tongue, you're not proving him a liar. You're only telling the world that you fear what he might say." And that was said by some guy named Tyrion from some show named Game of Thrones. And while we're not in Westeros, we're in the real world, censorship and these kind of things are pretty much an issue. And I wanted to start the conversation off by citing the ACLU, which may or may not be a defender of civil liberties right now. That could be debated. But it says that there's two fundamental principles that come into play.
Oh, come on. The ACLU just defended a woman which was like flying a fuck Biden sign in her house against like the local city council. Why? The ACLU has defended right-wing. Hell, the ACLU has literally defended the Ku Klux Klan, okay? So I don't think they're shying away from defending the right wing when they believe their civil liberties are under threat. Just because they like help migrants doesn't mean they're no longer a civil liberties organization. Okay.
play involving free expression. The first is the government cannot limit expression just because any listener or even the majority of a community is offended by its content. But that's balanced by a second principle, that expression may be restricted only if
they have changed over recent years. If you look at it, like in what way? Like in what way specifically have they changed?
Clearly causes direct and imminent harm to an important social interest. So I wanted to ask some of the panelists, do you agree with the sentiments of the ACLU here, or do you feel like this second principle is being abused? And if so, how and by whom? And let's start with Ariel.
It's a loaded question, right? Because I think all of us, correct me if I'm wrong, all of us have been censored at one point. Maybe not you, because you're a little bit more leaning far left at the moment.
I have absolutely been censored.
Okay, I'll read this thing about, well, never mind, I guess I will not be reading this thing about the ACLU later, but if somebody has some way to find a way for me to read this for free, I don't know how that would happen, I would appreciate reading it.
Have you?
Don't worry.
Okay,
Oh,
well
yeah.
then it's a problem across the political spectrum, right? I think that, as far as I'm concerned, I've had people come for me, you know, in multiple ways, try to censor me, and even if I disagree with them to the core, I don't
Wait,
think...
considering the type of content she means, when she says come for her, like I assume she means in the political sense.
think anybody should be censored, and I especially don't think any major network should be censoring anybody. I think, if anything, if I have a good enough argument, my argument will win in the long run anyway.
Okay. Peter.
Well, I mean, is it really an ideal, or is it a question of institutional power? That's where I'm always coming from on this. What are you saying? Where is it coming from? Should you be allowed to criticize power? And yes, obviously. Are you going to be? That's another heavy question. I do think that's probably the kind of stuff that I would like to be trying to address here.
Dude, I don't remember when Peter Coffin unfollowed me, but I think it was when I offered a very light criticism of him. He used to follow me. I remember saying, hey, you want to talk about foreign policy at some point? He was like, sure, we'll do it sometime. Never fleshed out. This might have been it. This might have been it. Communism isn't leftist and never has been. Leftism is inextricably connected to monarchism. Also, today's post-leftism and anti-leftism is just leftism and another aesthetic. I replied, what? Which I thought was appropriate. It might be, I don't know. It could be any number of things. He might have just saw a tweet that I did and was like, screw you. Who knows?
Okay. Nico, where are you at?
So a friend of mine, Garland Nixon, used to sit on the board of the ACLU, and he left because he understands that, I mean, that principle is just, it's wrong. It's unethical. We can't have such a principle when we don't understand all of the agendas that every single powerful institution has. And so where they may convince the public that some speech
the word agenda has completely been ruined for me by hearing the queer and gay and LGBT alphabet mafia, hearing the agenda tied to that so many times. Even if I'm describing the anti-union agenda, I can't use the word. It just feels so vague and like a specter, like a spooky specter boogeyman. I just can't use it ever. And every time I hear it, I roll my eyes now. And it's not even saying there could be agendas. Like the Republican Party's agenda is to target unions and to target and pass right to work law. Like that is true. That is just fact, right? But I'd rather just say it. They're anti-union policies. I'd rather say that because agenda just feels so nebulous now.
Or could be dangerous to them, where they're merely just trying to push an ulterior motive that we may not yet be aware of. And I think we see that time.
Propaganda too. People use the word so flippantly that it's exactly. Yes, Chad, I agree.
And time again. And so who's to say what's dangerous? Something could appear dangerous in the short term, but ultimately end up working out in the long term. But at the end of the day, I feel like everybody who knows me knows I'm a free speech absolutist. And the only way to defeat bad speech is just with more speech, and just make sure you know what the hell you're talking about when you address it. That's the way to conquer this fear of, what if they say something bad? Bad things could happen. Well, allow speech to flow freely, and I guarantee you problems will begin to solve themselves.
Nah, I mean, like, I agree with this generally in principle. I do. I think the one thing I would say is that it's a lot easier to smear feces on the wall than it is to clean it off of the wall, right? It's a lot easier for me to come out and say, like, this historical genocide was fake, this, and it's super easy to just pump that stuff out or take poorly edited fake photos and throw them on the internet. It's a lot more work to go out and disprove that. So if you're constantly machine gunning out disinformation, say about an ongoing pandemic, while I don't necessarily think saying incorrect things about the past should be banned by the law, I can completely understand like a social media platform saying we don't want to host this and spread this information.
Can I just piggyback on that point? Because this is one thing an ex-girlfriend said. The only thing I got from that relationship was this point. And she said that no matter what somebody says, we should allow them to say it because people are thinking it anyway. And when you allow them to say it publicly, you also allow people to be aware that they're saying possibly something that's incorrect, and then you can correct them on it. But you wouldn't be able to correct them if they didn't have the opportunity to say it in the first place.
I do think there should be areas for people, like, for example, like my show, I bring on people I disagree with or say things that are incorrect all the time. I just do my best to make sure that I have somebody in the room that can check them, right? Because giving people, let's say we just give people like unopposed platforms to just say whatever, then you go into an area where that's unopposed speech, where they can just say their narrative, get out of there, convince a few people that the nonsense they're saying is right, and skedaddle.
Destiny, what do you think?
I think that the First Amendment is important. I think it's beautiful. I think it's well worded. And I think freedom of speech as a concept is something that should be defended. But I think oftentimes people misapply it to private platforms like Twitter and Facebook. And they try to take these arguments about whether or not the government should abridge our freedom of speech, which it shouldn't, except in certain dire cases, like yelling fire in a crowded theater or the spreading of like child pornography or something, of course, which I think we all agree with. But I think that applying those same arguments to private institutions actually, in a way, becomes an anti-First Amendment argument. So I do agree that the First Amendment is important insofar as it applies to the government, but those principles shouldn't carry forward to every single private platform that we engage in, because one of your freedoms as an owner of a private platform is to determine what type of content do I want posted on this particular platform.
But what if that platform has become a monopoly? I think that's a good argument to combat that point too.
I mean, if a platform has become a monopoly, then we can talk about antitrust laws, we can talk about things like this, but you cannot enforce a platform to just have all content.
The answer to that question is if they become a monopoly, then you should break up the monopoly. The answer isn't, well, we need to make it so private entities have to host the speech of whatever they want, of basically everyone, and no matter how hateful or disgusting or misinformative that information is, private entities are now forced, if they want to be a social media platform, to host it. That's not the answer. The answer is you have multiple social media platforms with multiple different standards of regulation, where ultimately you'll have sites like Gab and Parler, which are a lot more lax when it comes to disinformation or hate speech. What I would deem hate speech. I know a lot of people have a problem with that word.
On it. It's an anti-First Amendment argument. I mean,
I'm still trying to understand, why do people keep pretending as if Facebook is a private platform? Like, it's not.
Because the definition
it's
of
not.
private
They
is
literally
that it's not.
have former CIA agents working within Facebook. Facebook goes into Congress, comes up with a bunch of nonsense after they get accused of something, and somehow, some way, they always end up coming out on top. In fact,
okay. So, this is just word games and word salad. I understand what he's getting at, but he's still wrong. Having former public or government officials working for your company does not make it a public company. This happens all the times where former Congress people or former government officials will take their experience and take it to a company. So having former government officials or former public officials working for your company does not make it public. Speaking before Congress also doesn't make you public. If that's the case, then when Steve Bannon speaks before Congress, is he a public official again? What? I don't understand a lot. I mean, I guess the idea he's saying is, well, government talk to company, and former government people work in company, therefore government. But the thing is, every single connection there is speaking to government. If it's a separate entity speaking to government, makes it pretty distinct that one of these things isn't the government. And if they're former government officials, it's pretty important because their former government officials are no longer working for the government.
It is literally a law that is allowing them to act as arbiters.
Someone just clap for the dude. This country's a dude.
Truthful or false information because of a law that it's protecting them. And whenever anyone goes to try and change it, they are the ones who have the money to then influence politicians. Not that they even have to, but they have the money to influence politicians to make sure that that law that they are benefiting from continues to allow them to then influence the outcome of elections in one form or another.
Well, no, that's a private entity trying to influence our public institutions. That doesn't make it a public institution. That makes it a private entity trying to lobby the government to favor policies that are beneficial to them, which is something that's gone on for a long time, for good and for bad. There's been lobby groups that have done great things and a lot of lobby groups which have done very, very bad things, particularly when it comes into like corporate interests. So again, he started it off on such a terrible premise. He could talk about like how these companies like influence the government and stuff, but like why start it off with the weird like this is a public entity, we can't call it a private. He just set himself up for failure.
At the end of the day, when they constantly act on behalf of the government, especially when it seems that there is a partisan agenda involved, when they go to the government and get exactly what they want, they're not being held accountable like other private institutions have been held accountable. At what point do we stop pretending that words mean, that private and public mean whatever they say it means when they're clearly acting as a public arm of the government?
So just say they've worked with the government on multiple initiatives, or they've influenced the government. You don't need to like do word salad here, because if that's the case, then like all the companies, like when the government like contracts a company, right, to like, you need to make us like this military thing, right, which happens all the time, or we're contracting these people to build this school, that doesn't make them a public entity. Whatever. I get the point he's trying to get at, but like why? Whatever. Let's just let it keep going.
So that's a conversation we get into. So private means not government, means privately owned. Facebook is a privately owned company. It's not owned by the government. If you want to have a conversation about whether or not Section 230 should be repealed, which it shouldn't be, if you want to have a conversation about whether or not platforms should be allowed to moderate their content, which they absolutely should be, if you want to have a conversation about whether or not you should be allowed to lobby the government, I think most of us agree you probably should be to some limited extent. Those are all great conversations to have, but the idea that just because a private company lobbies the government, they're somehow not
Are you
private.
familiar with In-Q-Tel? Do you know what In-Q-Tel is?
Don't need a what?
The CIA's venture capitalist firm in Arlington, Virginia. Basically, I can go through the whole way they did it, but basically Peter Thiel and In-Q-Tel invested into Facebook. That's how Facebook became what it was and overtook MySpace.
Man, and guess what? Everything he's about to say does not make it a public entity, okay? But whatever.
This is a thing that we've seen In-Q-Tel do because they have unlimited funding sources. Another example I can give you is how Google came out of nowhere and overtook Yahoo. It's because In-Q-Tel had unlimited money to ensure that Google was able to overtake Yahoo. That's how Amazon went from being a failed business platform, a failed business model, and eBay was destroying them, and then out of nowhere, where Jeff Bezos inexplicably becomes the most wealthy man in the world. That's how Tesla was a failed business, relying only and exclusively on our subsidies, and then now...
By the way, unlimited money is, I think, a weird way to put it, and I don't know this information, so I'll be good faith and assume what he's saying is true, but also I think he's like coloring a picture that it was like the government that made like Facebook and like Amazon successful, when that isn't necessarily true. If you know the history of Amazon, they basically like strung along investors, a lot of them, I think the vast majority of them outside of the US government, basically with the idea of what it would basically become a giant warehouse to sell goods after it evolved from what originally was like a bookstore. And just they grew and grew and grew for years off of basically this concept when they weren't making any product, and they just basically kept convincing investors like, we will become this thing that will be super profitable, which they were correct, even though they've become way too big and they've gotten way too much influence in our lives and have put a lot of mom and pop shops out of business. But a lot of that quote unquote unlimited money, weird way to put it, was from those private investing groups, which specifically were strung along with this dream of Amazon becoming what it basically is today.
Elon Musk is the most successful man in the world. So my point is, the reason Facebook has hit the peak that it's hit is because of the government. So even though it's private, it's just once again, it's just another way to rebrand public, but they just don't call it.
Amazon didn't turn in a profit for many years because they invested in infrastructure. Exactly, they were telling their investors like, look, we're making the investments now. Right now, we're not turning a profit, but just you wait. And well, obviously, those early investors probably have turned a pretty penny.
Beyond
if you want to have a conversation about whether or not some subsidy for electric vehicles should be repealed, if you want to have a conversation about whether some people should be allowed to privately invest in a company,
No. I
those
just
are all
said
great
the government
conversations to have,
literally
but
created
the problem is that
No, because you're doing Destiny. What we're not going to do today. So here's what we're not going to do today. You're not going to.
Okay, he was speaking, then you interrupt, and you're like, we're not doing this. But he's speaking. Okay.
Try to poke
Oh my
holes
God.
about shit that nobody's talking about.
No,
I said the
nobody's
government
You brought it up.
had their venture capitalist firm invest
right?
in a private company where no one else could compete.
I
That's what
love
we're
the
talking about.
When you say
So
when you say something along the lines of like, how did Jeff Bezos became a
I didn't
millionaire
say
overnight?
how. I
Or
gave
how
you the
did,
reason as to
Bezos
why.
became a billionaire
I
overnight?
didn't
know
say
why he
how.
became
I
a
didn't
billionaire
ask how.
overnight. It's
I
because
told
everybody
you
in
what
this room
happened.
probably uses Amazon Prime. Everybody in this room probably buys shit off Amazon. Everybody in this room probably uses Amazon Video. Like, we know why these companies become huge, because they offer products that everybody in society uses.
No, I
If
just.
you wanna-
Oh, how could Yahoo have been stopped by the government when they literally had a chance to buy both Google and Facebook at one point? Wait, what? What happened to Yahoo in 6? Hey, this is from my university. After Yahoo first started, good timing was not enough to overcome poor decisions. A missed opportunity with Google and search in 2002. Yahoo had the chance to buy Google for $1 billion, but executives dragged their feet. By the time they decided to pursue the offer, Google's price had soared to $3 billion. In the late 90s, search was only generating 6% of Yahoo's internet income stream, and the company believed it was not worth improving. Well, I think Obama probably made.
want to talk about repealing an individual law, if you want to talk about repealing an individual law,
please tell
if
me
you want to talk
one
about
company
repealing an
that can
individual
compete
law,
with unlimited funding from the government.
you can. Nobody's getting.
Wait, unlimited fund? What? How? Amazon was getting unlimited funding from the government. When and how and what?
Unlimited funding from the government.
I just told you. Do you
You're
look up,
talking to me about specific subsidies that exist for these companies.
Okay,
If you want to
so
argue,
All right, we gotta go to the next question.
Dude, you can't just make bold statements like unlimited money and then like somebody responds to it and you immediately interrupt them.
We gotta go to the next question.
This is a great moderator, by the way, doing great work, man.
Let's hear it out.
Conspiracy.
All right,
You're
right.
just
One
conspiracy.
second, let me cut in. Let's hear from the Marxist.
Can I be honest? Okay, I have learned through moderating which people have a backbone and which people don't. And I don't want to be that guy, but I'm going to be that guy for a second. This moderator seems like the type of guy I could walk to up at a bar, grab his drink the whole thing in front of him, put it down, walk out of the bar, and nothing would happen. I'm sorry, man. If right here, this is the interaction you let happen, like immediately, like I'm sorry, man.
Yeah. Well, see, the purpose of the state is to uphold class relations, right?
Go on.
Yeah. So that's kind
I'm
of
the
a
moderator.
joke.
I'm
That's
not
kind
allowed
of
to
a
agree.
joke.
Marxist.
Anyway, the purpose of the state is to uphold class relations.
All the moderators at the event sucked. It's not surprising. The thing is, they don't get moderators for these events. They get people who are involved in organizing the event. They get people who are maybe like celebrities in some way. They get people who don't know how to moderate debates. That's why my moderated debate between Bastiat and Vosh, where I basically had to do nothing, was so effective, mostly because both of them knew if they stepped out of line for a second, I'd jump down their throat. And because I have a history of moderating debates, I knew how to carry the conversation. I kept an eye on the clock, and I didn't get drunk beforehand like the main panel moderator did later. And then he started throwing out COVID disinformation, talking about 9/11 was an inside job during the end of the panel, just threw himself in there. Is because they get people who don't know how to moderate. They just throw in random people in there thinking anyone can do it.
Fundamental difference between the two classes: owner, not owner, right? Facebook is an owner. They benefit from all the action that the state does. Ultimately, I'm going to have to side with Nico on this. Like, it's going to be either through state subsidies, either through investment, either through any of that, that Facebook gains its dominance, that Amazon gains its dominance. Again, it was just a dumb bookstore in the 1990s that was nearing the, if you remember the .com bubble. That was they were going to go down with that. Why didn't they? In my opinion, that's really the question here.
Wait, you can't just pose a question and then not have the answer. Why did it? Okay, so I assumed the why didn't the answer would be Nico House's thing, but it's not. Okay, whatever.
It's 100%. Yeah, I'm just basically with you on this.
Like, the only way you can invest into SpaceX is to buy stocks in Google. And SpaceX is literally basically owned by the Pentagon now. So, like, that's a coincidence?
So is your argument that because government has undue influences over these social media entities, that therefore they're obstructing free speech, but not directly through law, but indirectly through company policy?
Yeah, where they don't have to be held accountable for what they do.
What do you mean by that? They don't have to be held accountable.
The government can't be held accountable for something, because people like Destiny are going to come up here and make an argument saying, no, that's just a private company. That's not the government doing that.
It is a private company. You started off on a ridiculous premise. If you wanted to talk about Facebook's ties to the government, talk about Facebook's ties to the government. They have ties to the government. But that's totally different from the batshit premise that it's somehow public now because it lobbied the government and it has former government employees working for them.
Yeah, the government is literally letting them skate at every turn, no matter how much information gets put on them, no matter how much people find out they're using their monopoly to influence the outcome of politics. But then when we go and try to hold anybody accountable, the government just ultimately gives Facebook what they want again, and then Facebook just starts the metaverse. And
so the reason why nobody is held accountable is because at the end of the day, all we do is...
Wait, what did the metaverse have to do with anything? You just said at the end of that Facebook starts... What did that have to do with anything? What does the metaverse have to do with anything he said about Amazon or unlimited? He just threw it in there.
We go online and we shitpost about how horrible these companies are, but you can't actually point to a piece of legislation.
It'd be like if I was talking about Blizzard and I was like, Blizzard had all these policies with their company and their employees treated so terribly. Oh my God! And you know, and you know, Junkrat as a main is a terrible option. It's like, wait, why did you? Why? I feel like that last thing you just said is completely separate from the main point you were building. That's a weird thing to end on.
Repealed, you can't point to some actual.
We could literally just
taken.
reform 230.
You can't. If you want to talk about 230, you can. Repealing 230 would lead to an
I didn't say
unbelievable.
so I didn't say repeal.
You can talk about reforming 230. Reforming 230.
Reform 230.
Sure, you can reform 230. That's probably going to destroy every single new website that would.
Why would it do that when you can just reform it and make sure it doesn't do?
Okay, listen to Nico. He's like. Okay, we could reform it, but it will destroy. And he doesn't even finish his sentence. Nico jumps on him, man. The thing is, this is the second time I've seen Nico debate, and I feel like Nico is the type of guy to come out there and he's like, yell the entire time, never let their opponent to speak, take advantage of terrible, terrible moderators, and then at the end be like, that other person didn't even want me to speak at all. That's why he was trying to talk over me so much, even though they were just yelling 90% of the time.
Okay, how would you want to reform? How would you want to reform? Give me a sample. You can scream all you want. It doesn't make you any smarter. It doesn't make your point any more correct.
Try to assign a definition
to a word
because you don't like the fact that it destroys your argument.
Tell us how you want to reform.
I said reform.
Dude, you didn't even hear he hasn't even said his argument yet because he's been yelling the whole time. What the? Dude, this moderator is Look, he's smiling. This little coward is smiling.
We can talk about how the reform should look, but it's not going to destroy all future websites.
Tell us how you want to reform 230.
You're being ridiculous.
Give me a sample reform. Give me a sample reform.
You're being ridiculous, bro. Come on.
No. Ask him. I want to know a sample reform of 230.
Ariel whispered to me that we should express what Section 230 is. So it's quote, no provider or use of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content.
I like somebody just said better discourse. Just better discourse. Just hovering above their heads as Nico just destroys any concept of discourse. Nico is living proof that the free market of ideas is fundamentally flawed. Every time he opens his mouth, it is another example against his own case.
Provider.
Yeah, I had to look that up, by the way. I didn't know what that was. So, I'm glad that you said it for people that also don't know what that was.
Yeah, my bad.
So that's Section 230, which gives them certain immunities, right? So
what is the 230 reform that we're looking for?
As long as they're
how do you want to change it?
Bubble.
Do you want to repeal it, or how should we alter 230?
No, you would reform it to make exceptions in cases like Facebook, for example, where they're acting as publishers, but
Facebook
then you got to
publish.
So then you allow people to sue them as if you were suing a CNN or an MSNBC or Fox News. Currently, you cannot. That's the problem.
How is it so the entire backbone of the internet, from IRC chats to bulletin message boards in the 80s to GeoCities websites in the 2000s. The only reason why websites can exist is because they require an immunity from being sued if they have user-generated content on their platform.
No, they're private companies.
Can I finish one sentence? Holy shit. Okay,
They're
you don't
private
want it so
companies,
that
though.
anytime
Just shut
somebody
up,
posts
Jesus
something
Christ.
on your website, you can get sued for what another user uploads
No,
on your
that-
site. If
no,
that
no.
is the case,
That's not what we're
if that
talking
is the
about.
case,
I
that
don't-
absolutely
Where
is
do you
what you're
just
talking
invent
about.
these fake
There's a
realities in
reason
your
why-
head?
There's a reason
We're
why
not. We're talking about
you're just
Facebook being
talk over
held
it over again in
accountable
order to make your
for
point right.
removing people's
There's a reason
content,
why
destroying
nobody in the
people's
legal community
businesses,
and nobody
destroying
in the
people's
online
He's
lives.
not
community,
letting.
You're talking
Jesus
about
Christ, I
random
can't even. I don't even know what's happening anymore because of Nico, man. Dude, this is better discourse.
Shit,
Dude, at this point, I feel like, honestly, I should have flown down because at this point in this panel, I could have just walked on stage and start yelling and the moderator would have done nothing. It's just literally powerless.
Nobody is talking about reforming 230.
It's,
because
it's
it
a
is
little
the
bit
worst
loud and
idea in the
echoey.
world.
So,
My bad.
yeah. So try not to talk
Yeah.
over each other.
Reforming 230.
Oh, great job. Okay, just. I mean, I get it. You gotta interrupt once, but. Okay.
Destroy anybody's ability to start any
Look, I understand how it feels. You don't want to call a single person out because they know they're not going to look at you well. But he should have started with that maybe like 10 minutes ago and then start calling out the individual. At this point, he should have called out Nico like 3, 4, 5 times.
internet website where you have user-generated content, because as soon as you can hold a website...
Dude, Nico could never go on my roundtables. Literally never could. He would be like kicked off in like 20 minutes. It's impossible. It'd be there's no way he'd be able to shut up. I just don't believe it. Honestly, the only debate I'd be interested in organizing with Nico House would be him versus CTV.
Liable for what users are posting, just because you want to engage in moderation? Should you not be allowed to moderate your communities? If you wanted to make a message board for right-leaning people or for feminists, do you not have the ability to moderate your communities that way? Of course you should be able to do that without being held liable as a publisher or something of information. And these websites, just because they engage in moderation, doesn't make them a publisher. That's ridiculous. To try to say that because somebody puts up a fact check or because somebody puts up or ban...
Hey, let's see if anything comes of this. Nico House after not speaking for 1 minute. Okay. Let's get back to it. I just having a little bit of fun.
Certain types of content, they become all of a sudden a publisher of information. What do you think it means to publish something?
When
to
you're
moderate
getting fun,
something?
when you were, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think here's a problem though. They're not just a neutral platform.
They don't have to be neutral.
Oh, where really?
Yes, really, yeah.
Yes,
Okay,
according
so let's hear why they don't have to be neutral.
Because that's the law. You're not obligated. There is no we just talked about the First Amendment. If you started a private platform where you brought people on to speak, do you think that the First Amendment means that you have to...
Okay, so... Now, there is a thing about news stations and neutrality that used to be law, but that was repealed. But currently in the United States, the idea that that they have to be neutral in all interaction and let everybody just interact however they want on their platform. Like, let's think about how that would fundamentally function if we just had because if you want to propose these reforms, you got to tell me exactly how it would work, because you could see scenarios where people are acting in the most hateful possible ways on the internet, and you just let it go. And you know what? There's a lot of people who will say to that, here, it's how it is. But you got to really think about the type of scenarios you could have where you have message boards or communities or social media websites like, hey, this is a website that we made for survivors of rape to talk about their trauma. It's something, maybe I'd be interested in. And then I go on there, and if they can't moderate, if that has to be the public forum, we all know the type of people that would take advantage of that to abuse people in that environment. And so if you're going to be proposing okay, these companies need to be the public forum and everybody speaks, and the best ideas win, you really got to think about the type of website you would end up having, as I wouldn't want to be on it. If literally anybody could say anything they wanted to me on Twitter in relation to stuff like that, there's no way I'd want to be on that platform. No way in hell.
Let every single person come on. That's a violation of your First Amendment rights. If I start a forum and I want to talk about how cool dogs are, am I legally obligated to let cat lovers come and shut my forum up with how great their animal? It doesn't make any sense. Of course you should be...
Okay, so Destiny pre-watched my commentary about this video, obviously. He just made it a little less intense.
You don't have to be a neutral platform. Do you think Fox News is a neutral platform? Do you think CNN is a neutral platform? No,
you
you
can
don't have
sue
to be
Fox
a neutral
News and
platform.
You can
CNN.
sue Fox News
You can literally
for
sue
things
them.
that are said on Fox
If they
News.
lie, you can
because
sue
they
them.
curate
If they
those
defame you,
platforms.
you can sue them. If they slander you, you can sue them.
That's the difference. When
Yeah,
So we should be able to sue Facebook for stuff said about other people that are libelous on their platform. What type of standards of moderation could that... I'm genuinely curious about how that standards of moderation would work. Because maybe somebody could sell me on this, because I'm not a fan of Facebook, okay? I look at what they facilitated in ethnic conflict in Ethiopia. The disinformation spread on their website that led to people dying, man. And I understand, like, that's something that needs to be dealt with. But let's say that I'm, like somebody who, like, says something about a politician. Right? And the politician's like, well, I'll sue for libel. The company's like, okay, we gotta shut it down, cut it, take it down. And then what you could have is basically like politicians and public figures doing the equivalent of slap suits on social media posts to just take it down. The same way that like YouTube will like cave like in an instant if any company comes by and says, this is copyrighted, and then YouTube just has to cave. Like, what are they gonna do? Unless you take it to court.
Facebook
Exactly.
I'll give you an example of consequences. So recently, in Texas actually, a man's son died after taking the vaccine.
This isn't like me like even like necessarily planting my position in the ground. I'm genuinely curious how that situation would be dealt with.
He was 16 years old, the son was. When he posted GoFundMe to pay for the funeral, GoFundMe removes him.
You don't have a constitutional right to post on GoFundMe. I'm sorry.
Because of that, obviously it becomes much more difficult.
Can't interrupt Nico House. Nico House can interrupt you.
To fundraise for that funeral. Now, why did they remove him? Like, it's a literal fact that the vaccine caused this man's son's death, but they're saying because it's spreading vaccine misinformation that he can't fundraise there because then, of course, would bring attention to the fact that there might be side effects. Like, Facebook removed people for saying that hydroxychloroquine was a legitimate solution, or at least to help while we're waiting for vaccines when it came to COVID, and then doctors were banned. People died. Fucking Destiny, people died.
Are you wait, first of all.
No, what I'm telling you is that there are real consequences when you are removing people because you're pretending to be an arbiter of information when you're literally removing experts. It's one thing if you moderate the content by saying this isn't allowed, you give them a strike. But if you think that they should be removed, then you go through the
Wait. So it's one thing to say this isn't allowed. What? So we are pro moderation. We are pro taking posts down. You just, the posts you like or not like?
Court of law, and you hold them accountable there, and if someone has decided that you are overtly or accidentally causing problems that could lead to mass conflict or violence or whatever, then you allow the courts to settle it. But what you're suggesting is that we should allow this entity that has gotten unlimited funding from the government
They don't.
where you can't, to the point
what's the
where now
rebuttal?
you can no longer actually have competition against them.
All right, Nico, let's hear a rebuttal now.
So everything about
Can
hydroxy...
somebody actually send me where this like unlimited funding from the government is? Can somebody please send me what he's even referring to?
Chloroquine has been proven to be ineffective.
Bullshit.
So the fact
See,
that you would bring
rejected
that up...
Look, you saw Destiny that whole time when he was like, pause. Destiny was like, okay. And he wait. And like Nico House would start to end a statement and then just keep going. He waited. Destiny just opens his mouth and Nico just can't contain himself. He doesn't know how to have better discourse. It's impossible.
Can I finish? Wait, can I finish?
And look, the moderator just letting it happen. The moderator, this is the part where you don't say, okay, everybody shut down. You turn to Nico and you say, Nico, stop. He let you talk. It is time for him to talk. I will make sure that you have proper time to respond if he says something in response to you. Like that, but
Finish? Are you gonna scream over me every time I start counteracting the bullshit you say up here?
Give him a chance.
I need like 10 minutes.
Give him a chance. The only time he's speaking up is when Destiny has to. Okay.
To go through every fucking stupid thing you just said.
Go ahead.
So number one, hydroxychloroquine is like the worst example of anything you could brought up of. Okay, number one. Number two, if a private platform wants to ban somebody from their community for any reason, they're allowed to do that. You do not have a constitutional right to post on fucking GoFundMe. Just like any person in this audience doesn't have a constitutional right to come up on... I know you want to talk. Nobody in this audience has a constitutional right to come up here and grab a microphone and scream at somebody. That's part of your First Amendment privilege. If you start a platform,
How are those two things analogous?
You are
How are
allowed
those
to
two things
moderate.
analogous?
You are allowed to moderate that content in any way that you see fit. The idea
Am I
that you are
receiving
obligated-
unlimited money from the
idea that you
CIA?
are obligated. The
Am
idea that
I
you are
receiving unlimited money?
obligated-
Let him go.
The idea.
I doubt Facebook's receiving unlimited money from the. Does anybody have a link to what he's talking about? Unlimited money from the CIA? I thought it was whatever.
That you are obligated to host all forms of content on your website is a delusional fantasy. I don't know where it came from. I don't know where people got this idea from. There's no case law that supports this. There's no legislation that supports this. There's no constitutional amendment that supports this. It is absolute delusion.
No. There's literally a law that says
so
if you
anybody
act
wants
as a
to,
public,
bro, you can't cut me off 30 times after talking
let's take
a whole
an
bunch of shit for
example.
like 5 minutes.
Okay,
Wait, can I finish responding?
Yeah.
Holy shit, yeah. So if a website decides that they want to moderate their content in the way that they see fit, if they want to ban doctors, if they want to ban experts, if they don't want you to do your...
He claims that this VC firm is funded by the CIA and they gave them money. Okay. Inkilltech. Okay. Let's go Facebook. Inkilltech sold 5,636 shares of Google worth over $2.2 million in November 2005. Reviewed more than 5,000. It funded with $150 million more than 90 companies. In 2016, it was funding with at least $120 million per year, primarily from the CIA. Wait, if it has a $120 million budget, that is most certainly not even close to what, like, how much is like Facebook's annual budget? Facebook's annual budget. So it's 46, in millions. So is this 4.6 billion, I think? I think that's 4.6 billion. This is written in a very weird way. I can't, okay, so it's 46, 7 millions of USD. Oh wait, it's 46 billion. Oh. Well, then obviously that $120 million, which doesn't all go to Facebook but goes to multiple companies, is what I would call unlimited money. That looks like $120 million in comparison to 46 billion. That's very unlimited money. Very, very unlimited. It literally, even if they somehow spent every single dime on specifically Facebook, they wouldn't even be able to cover the expense increase from 2018 to 2019. Somebody's doing Dylan like facepalm. Like, what am I not getting? Is there, please, I don't know about this company, but this doesn't look like unlimited money to me. Yeah, and that money, that 120 million, is across multiple companies. Unlimited funding from the CIA. Dude, could you imagine, like, the CIA, as much money that it has got, it has a restrained budget. And so if you're talking about a company that has $46 billion, the idea that it could provide unlimited money to the Facebook or Google or any of these companies, I think is a little ridiculous.
Your whatever fucking GoFundMe, that's completely and totally within their right to do so. And just because they don't want to host your content doesn't mean you can go cry to the federal government and say, I have a right, I have a constitutional right to this platform. That's an insane reading of how the First Amendment works.
Pause.
No, I don't need to
We're not talking about
I will fit.
Thank you. Okay, I didn't check this source. This is a good check. Okay, I gotta save that one. Jesus. Thank you. Thank you for confirming it in chat, guys.
We're not talking about the First Amendment.
Okay,
We're talking about,
that's fine.
literally Section 230 protects you only and exclusively if you're not behaving as a publisher. So another
Bingo.
great example would be the Hunter Biden situation where
Wait, who just said bingo?
a publisher. So another
Bingo.
great example would be the
just
Hunter
Peter.
Biden
He's just
situation
being his hype
where
man.
every single time a Hunter Biden article would come out, people were getting banned. People were literally
So,
losing
like, you mean Twitter?
a
Twitter
business.
stopping the link to the.
Oh,
New
not
York
just
Post
Twitter.
article.
Facebook, Twitter. My friend got banned from Facebook for 7 days. Another one of my friends got removed for
Moderating
posting
is not
an
publishing.
article from mainstream media about Biden on Facebook with no context. Banned. Now, all of a sudden, you're banning people not because the information is wrong, just because you don't like what's being put out there. Now, that's what we call editing. That is editorial. That is publishing, which means you should
Why
be
do you
able to
think
be
Twitter-
pause. You should be able to be held accountable, but you cannot be because you're hiding behind 230.
Why did Twitter ban the Hunter Biden article?
Motherfucker, please explain it to me because we would love to know.
No, wait, you brought it up, so you
He
should
brought it up, yeah.
know
Why
better.
did they
So
ban
tell
it?
me. You tell me.
We're literally trying to find out. Go ahead.
We're not trying. It's public information, so you don't know.
Why
I want
they
to hear
ban
you
it?
say, I have no fucking idea why Twitter banned
You
it.
don't even
I
know
thought
which
you did.
article I'm referring to right
I know
now,
exactly
but go
which
ahead.
one. I know exactly what you're referring to.
Which one?
So tell me. You tell me. You brought it
No,
up
no,
first.
no. You just said you know exactly what it is. Go ahead.
Why are you trying to posture right now? You brought up the example. so I
You
want
just
to
literally
explain
cut me
everybody
off to
here.
ask. You
I
just said
want
you know the
to
answer.
explain-
He's got him he has no clue. He has no clue. Oh. Oh.
Okay.
You know the reason
so
why.
You don't know
I'm
why
telling
it was,
you,
you don't
if
know why.
you know why it was.
If he knew why, he'd say it, okay? If he's making claims about unlimited money from the CIA, if he even had an inkling of why it was banned, he'd say, yeah.
I'll
Please
explain,
enlighten
but I
us.
will explain.
All right,
so
let me-
Twitter, wait. So Twitter has a specific policy for hacked materials where if you upload
wasn't hacked.
something on, if you upload
It literally wasn't hacked.
If you upload,
Jesus
did Hunter
Christ,
Biden
Nico.
approve of those images and everything from the laptop being posted?
It wasn't hacked.
And it's a hacked material.
It literally wasn't
so
hacked.
Twitter has also banned people on the
USB.
You're just gonna keep
Here you
talking over me
go.
like that makes you correct?
You got it. You got it.
I'm right here, dude. You don't have to look at the
It's a
audience.
USB.
Hey, talk
They
to me.
handed
You don't
it
have to
over
look at the
here.
audience.
They were like,
Come on,
hey,
Nico.
post this.
Hey.
New York Times. Is New York Times banned for posting hacked
Let him
material?
rebut, and then we're getting to the next question.
I'm right here. I don't know.
It's not, oh my God, it's not about the New York Times posting banned material. It is about a social media platform having a policy about hacked material. You're like, oh, it wasn't hacked, it went through a USB? So you mean they took his private information without his consent through USB? Like, if I oh, dude. I'm sorry.
It
man.
is the New York Times.
This is brain rot.
Talking to somebody else right now?
I'm trying to understand.
you lost?
I wasn't going to answer my question.
You gotta let him talk. We have like a
Destiny's handling this poorly. Well, Destiny, there's no way to handle this, like, in a good way because Nico's just gonna yell. Like, let's say, like, Dylan, you're not debating very well. And I'm like, so my position is, and the other person's like, pause, unlimited funding, CIA. And I'm like, anyway, what I was trying to say, pause, hacked material? That isn't hacked material. Like, since there's no decorum set, it's impossible for me to make movement on any of my positions. It is the moderator's job to control this, and he's failing miserably.
Is the New York Times banned for posting hacked materials? Because last time I checked, they did it all the time.
But Nico, we get the point. You gotta let him respond.
But that's my point.
I'm right here.
Hey, you are not.
And he's like, Nico, let him respond. And he's just like, I don't even acknowledge your existence, moderator. I'm just gonna keep going. At a certain point, you know what you do? You turn off his mic. That's why I don't know if I want to commit myself to this, but I will say this. I will heavily suggest to every place I go to that if you have me as a moderator, you got to give me the ability to turn off people's mics. Because people like Nico House, I'm not going to debate him live on stage. I'm just going to be like, off. No, I'm not going to debate you on your ability to speak right now. I've told you to stop, and you haven't stopped. Dude, this is terrible, man. Z Somewhere, thanks for the tier 1. I appreciate it.
Understanding the lack of consistency.
I understand completely.
That's
You
the
just
issue.
had no idea.
You're telling me what the rule is, but they won't explain why they don't consistently follow the fucking rule.
Because
that's the problem.
Does anyone in the audience have a Xanax?
If you wanted to discuss the Hunter Biden story or post the Hunter Biden story, you were absolutely allowed to, as long as you didn't link to a website that had hacked materials listed on it. Number one, and I know that because I discussed it on Twitter and I get banned. Number one, okay. Number two, there was a left-leaning group that leaked a whole bunch of like police materials, part of the big ACAB thing. I think it was like a year prior, and they got banned for doing the exact same type of thing. This particular story is not a story of political bias. It's a story where you, who has a clear political narrative, has taken one story, completely misrepresented it, and then try to pretend that it supports your side of the political narrative.
Is New York Times banned
That's exactly
for
what it
posting
is.
hacked material?
Okay,
so the answer is a yes or no question.
Yes, if you post
no, they're not. They post WikiLeaks leaked material. They have not been banned. What are you talking about?
If you are,
CNN did it. Didn't Trump's taxes just get leaked and it got posted?
I'm right here.
Those are hacked materials, correct?
I'm right here.
Okay, that's what I thought.
I'm right here.
So the problem isn't.
He can't look at him. He can't look at him. He's just preaching to the audience. He has these dialogue trees, and he's just preaching to the audience, man.
That they are taking their right to
look at Destiny, man. He's like actively getting like a severe case of depression. Honestly, there needs to be a doctor on stage right now. There needs to be. If I was in the audience, I probably would have called the cops during this debate to do a wellness check on Destiny, just to make sure he didn't do anything to himself, because this is just terrible, man. This is sad.
Enforce their rules. What we're trying to figure out is, why are you inconsistently forcing rules? What do you do when those rules are being forced inconsistently and they're supporting a certain political agenda while undermining another? And then at that point, when does that not make you a publisher? And if it does make you a publisher, why can you not be held to the same level of accountability
hey, but Nico,
as an actual
dude, everything Nico says, he says it like with such volume and like like a train engine, man. Like you can emphasize certain words, but when you emphasize literally every other word, then the points that you want to emphasize have the same impact as like the word the.
publisher.
Let's
it's very
practice.
simple.
let's attack this from a slightly different angle. I'm gonna ask Ariel what she thinks of this. So in 2019, Cedric Richmond, U.S. Congressman from Louisiana, warned Facebook and Google that they had better restrict what he and his colleagues saw as harmful content or face regulation. Quote, he said, "We're gonna make it swift. We're gonna make it strong. We're gonna hold them accountable. Figure it out because you don't want us to figure it out for you." And Jerry Nadler added to that, "Let's just see what happens if I pressure them." Is this worrying to you that the people that are governing their content moderation are influenced by congressmen? Ariel, what do you think? Is that like a skirt around the First Amendment, or what's your thoughts?
I think that anybody that has power is going to try to control more. That's just the fact, right? That happens throughout history.
Shocking revelation.
It worries me when people use that power to silence people. Like that's like the part. That's the concept of this panel, right?
Yeah.
I think that I do agree partially with what he's saying. I understand where he's coming from with Stephen, and I think that if you do have your own platform, yes, you can moderate content in a way because because if there's like pornography or something, you don't want that. Yes. But I also think people are taking that to the extreme and making it political.
Somebody needs to check her, okay? She might have unlimited funding from the CIA.
And just because they don't like something, they're removing
feel
that.
that,
I don't think that's a healthy way for this country to be going.
Do you feel like the government has an undue influence on what Facebook is doing?
Oh yeah, I do. I think this is just me personally, but I think that it's fairly obvious to me that Facebook has some kind of secret agreement, whatever, I don't know, with the Democratic Party, because and YouTube too. I mean,
What?
I speak from personal experience. I know that.
What? What? You can't just allege secret agreements with no evidence. Okay, then I believe Nico House has a secret agreement with the CIA to make the left look bad. I think it's very obvious to anyone who watched this panel.
Until I came out, I was posting the same content for 10 years on YouTube, sexual education, until I came out as leaving the left and being a non-leftist, then they started banning me and restricting me. So to me, that's my experience of what you're saying, and I don't think, obviously, I'm biased, but I don't think that's okay.
What was the reason? Did they say that you were causing harm? I mean, is it the second
They said it was
principle?
because of my sexually explicit content, but I've been posting that same content for 10 years. So to me, it's okay, they don't like what I'm saying now.
Okay. What about you, Stephen?
But yeah, I do think it's because that's to me, it's too obvious. It was too obvious to me that this is why it was happening.
Right. So, Stephen, what do you think? If there's a link between the government, senators pushing these guys, doesn't that not apply? Isn't that the government using abridging the First Amendment in the wrong way?
I mean, I think it would.
I'm happy Nico House takes a principled stance against censorship. And stands against the censorship all the time, It would never stand with those who censor the press at any point. He would never do such a thing. Never in his life. And I just want to say, it's crazy, man, that people are rejecting him in this debate. I just don't understand it.
Depend on what they're pushing for or what the implication is. If the implication is that if this behavior is going on that leads to some sort of harm and we're going to legislate a new law or we're going to enforce a law in the book about it, that's probably fine. That's what Congress is there for. But if it's something we're pressuring you to censor certain political narratives or whatever, then that's probably not okay. I will say though, again, a platform has the right, even if they want to ban, Republicans or Democrats on their platform, it's within their right to do so as a social media platform.
Yeah.
Now,
And
pressure,
I agree with you.
Sure.
I don't think it's good, but I think that by law they should be able to.
Sure,
I don't
and
think,
I agree 100%
Yeah.
with that.
I don't think it's a
the
good thing for the
censoring
country,
of,
though.
depending on the platform.
Yo, check Ariel Scaselli's most of you. Oh, we already looked at it. It's all like scissoring and tasting your own vagina. It's all sexual stuff, or a lot of times it's just softcore porn. Yeah.
Censoring of conservative speech or whatever online, it sucks because
Some of it's sex education, but some of it's softcore porn. Yeah.
more boring for me because I like to shout at people, and I don't have as many people shout at
Do you
online
think
anymore 'cause all the
230 is
servers get
fine
banned.
the
What?
way it is? You think 230 is fine the way it is? You no changes?
I don't think 230 is fine. I think 230 is essential for the internet to function the way that it does. Without 230 written as is, you lose. Like the new world going forward is every single platform would have to moderate every single comment posted, knowing that they might get in trouble for, like, the reason why 230 came about was that when certain platforms were moderating their content, the idea was that, well, hold on, if you're going to ban some stuff and not other stuff, you're basically tacitly approving of other stuff that's being posted, so we can sue you for that. And so people were starting to take websites to court for stuff that their users had posted on the site.
Yeah.
If I posted defamatory content of anybody on this stage, you shouldn't be able to sue the platform that I posted on. You should sue me for it, right? That's the essential protection that 230 provides so that websites can continue to exist while allowing user-generated content to flourish on their sites.
Well, the difference between the two things is whether it's a provider or a publisher. And there are a lot of things that Facebook does that make it a publisher. It is not specifically just a provider. The algorithmic way that they sort content, they prioritize certain types of content, they push certain types of content, and whether it's because of a political agenda or because it's the content that makes them more money, and I understand that that's probably something that is built in. It is going to be a contradiction that you're not going to be able to get rid of anytime soon. But in a lot of cases, Facebook is acting as a publisher rather than a provider.
So this is just not true. So people have tried
How?
to stretch. Well, I'm about to answer that. So people have tried to stretch this idea that if you have an algorithm that shows certain information, or if you do like a fact check, or if you moderate certain content, that this makes you a publisher. It is very clear, like, a publisher is somebody that publishes information. So if Facebook were to start writing articles, or if Twitter were to start writing articles and they were pushing these or whatever, then those 230 live...
What's an op-ed page?
What?
What is an op-ed page in a newspaper? Does New York Times, like Mr. New York Times, write everything there? Or do other people do it?
An op-ed page, my understanding is that on that, you would be liable for that, but that's because you're publishing what's on the op-ed page. You're like approaching a writer and you're saying, we're going to hire you.
Yes, so let's say Twitter was to hire me and pay me to write op-eds for Twitter. Then they would be a publisher. But if I go on Twitter and say, Peter Coffin kicked a puppy because he hates babies and Dolly Parton, they didn't publish that. I just said that. And if you wanted to, like, sue me for that, you couldn't sue Facebook or Twitter or whatever I posted on. You'd have to sue me on the individual level.
Pay you for this, like, op-ed, and we're going to publish it in our magazine. Now,
Hiring
Twitter,
and paying is irrelevant.
If Twitter payment is essential. It might be
No, it
essential
is not.
depending on what we're talking.
Absolutely not.
Do you understand that there is a difference between a newspaper that solicits op-eds from people versus a platform where any user more or less can sign up and generate content?
He said hiring and pay is irrelevant.
Yeah, hiring and pay is irrelevant. And Facebook is soliciting content from us, sorting it and putting it out based on their own preferences. An algorithm.
Daily Kos, for example, you didn't have to be it's like a blog. It was just a very sophisticated blog before it became what it became. So, like, no hiring.
Look, if you look at, like, the top 10, like, people on Facebook, like, every month, it always ends up being, like, Ben Shapiro or other right-wingers are, like, always, like, 7 out of the 10 when it comes for, like, top political pages. And so the reasons why, I think, if we look at what the whistleblower showed us, and if this ends up being a video, we put some stuff of the whistleblower right here. If it's not here, Geek, you failed. She talks about how the algorithm specifically favors those who have, like, content that makes you angry, not happy, because it's easier to solicit a response from somebody with an emote or a comment if the stuff makes you angry or it's a divisive content. So Facebook's actively pushing divisive content because that's the type of content people interact with on the individual level. They're not purposely going out like, we're going to choose all the divisive content and put them at the top. It's like divisive content is what the algorithm favors because that's the stuff that people interact with the most. That's what I know from the leaks. So, and again, like, the people who, like, dominate the political space on Facebook always end up being right-wingers. So the idea that, like, if this Facebook censorship's, like, so terrible, why is it that, like, every single month it's, like, right-wingers dominating it?
And pay is relevant, but Daily Kos could still be sued. Huh?
Yeah, you see the difference?
My understanding is that
You
if
see
you
the
have a
difference, though?
website where any person can just submit content willy-nilly, if it's like some WordPress site, some blog or whatever, like Medium, for instance, you can't sue Medium for somebody that writes an article on Medium because Medium is not like the publisher; it's just a distribution platform for that article. Now,
Yeah, but
even
it
if you've
doesn't
got
treat all that
an
content the
algorithm
same.
that sorts stuff,
Exactly.
like you might like this, you might like that, or even if you ban stuff like we don't want this, we don't like that, that still doesn't make them a publisher of the information.
But see-
They're just a content distribution network.
Does
It's
it
a CDN
change-
that somebody uses for user-generated content to show up on their website. The content all comes from people,
Is there
not
a,
endemic to the company.
So, well, we don't know if Medium could be sued. Maybe they could. We don't know. Like, honestly,
Wait, we don't know what? I couldn't
We
hear
don't
you.
know if Medium can or can't be sued. No one has ever attempted to because
We
they
do
don't
know
just
because it's protected by
arbitrarily
230.
they don't arbitrarily remove people's information just because it doesn't agree with a certain political agenda. To my knowledge, I've never heard any complaints about
Removing
that.
information that doesn't agree with the
However,
political agenda doesn't mean you
Destiny,
lose your
let me
Section
finish
230
talking,
protections.
Mr. Oh,
He does not need to let you finish talking. Dude, Destiny at this point needs to just bully Nico on the stage. She just needs to like, oh, you're talking? I don't care. And make it so the moderator has to establish law and order. Because if he doesn't, like, hey, you know what? When it comes to these debates, I'm a law and order type of guy. Okay? Because at this point, if he doesn't, Nico's just going to steamroll him. You need to establish some level of decorum. It's why when I was hosting the Infrared debate, Infrared is a lot like Nico House when it comes to like the way they speak. And so that's why I had to mute Infrared. I had to tell him, like, literally, we're doing timed backs and forth. I had to put so many safeguards in place to make that debate go forward. And that's with just like 2 people. There's 4 people here. By the end of this panel, I bet like Scarelli over here is going to like talk for maybe like 10% of it max.
I don't think you've let me finish a single thing, so I have very little sympathy for you at this
Look,
point.
bro,
What do you want to say,
let me
Nico?
finish talking. I'll just let you pontificate for a fucking hour as usual. Let me talk.
Oh,
please.
yeah,
Thank
1
you.
hour, man.
What do you wanna say?
Anyway, so like I was saying, we don't know that about Medium. But
We do
also,
know that. That's wrong.
then we can get to the actual precedent
There you
that
go,
has been set
Destiny.
because people are like, oh, these private
Screw the decorum. Screw it. Just go in.
platforms like Twitter or Facebook have the ability to just remove politicians whenever they feel like it. Actually, the courts say otherwise because Trump couldn't even ban someone because he is technically a public figure and they considered it to be a public forum. They couldn't even. So if you obviously
that's wrong. That's not
why,
even
hold
true.
on, let me finish talking, Mr. Judge. Like I didn't know you were a damn federal judge.
I don't have to judge it.
Okay,
It's
then
already
anyway,
been
let me
judged.
finish
It's already
talking.
been
Thank you
ruled
very
on.
much. Appreciate it. Anyway, so just from the precedent that's already been set by the court, they said, and it was like it was a leftist decision. Like Democrats were like, you can't block us, ha ha. ha.
Anytime
So
they don't
it
agree
is.
with
Well,
the
hold on,
leftist,
let me
yeah,
finish.
okay.
Jesus
Don't let
Christ,
him.
bro.
How many dumb
This is
things
not
can
your
you
Twitch
say? It's like a
stream.
fucking machine gun
This
with
is not your
stupid
Twitch
shit.
stream. Chill.
All right, we got to
Let me
get to
talk.
it.
Anyway,
It is his Twitch stream.
when
actually.
Trump got banned from Twitter,
Wait,
That
wasn't it literally streamed on Twitch? I think it actually is a Twitch stream.
was probably the most egregious form of censorship that we had ever seen because literally the outcome of an election could or could not have been affected by it. When you are talking about because this is America, right? So if the outcome of our election is affected by, which that means you're affecting the outcome of the geopolitical arena all over the world. And there is literally no accountability, ironically, in the same country where everybody's talking about election interference all the time.
But so could a movie, right?
Yeah, but you could if the movie influences it, you have a choice whether or not you want to engage with that content. Like they don't funnel it to you, they don't force you to go there. But if I have a business, if I have like my
What
political
forces you to
opinion,
use Twitter,
if I don't,
Facebook?
Okay, so Facebook
when
is
you
right.
have a business that is
Damn, imagine being so down bad on the internet that you think you gotta be forced to use Twitter. Okay, let me show you guys something, right? Okay? Here is my Twitter account, okay? Here it is, right? There's a thing about Rittenhouse. There's a thing about Tony Khan, right? Tony Khan, AEW. Okay, here is the magic trick that Nico House doesn't understand or know, okay? Look. You're welcome.
on Twitter and Facebook because they are okay. We just went through this. Okay, so once again, unlimited funding. There is no.
There is
Hold
no
on.
unlimited
Let me
funding from the
finish
government.
talking.
I don't think you know what
my
funding or
God.
unlimited means. I don't think you know what
okay,
either of those
just
words
because
mean.
you don't like the logic that's about to come doesn't mean
It's
you can
not
cut it
about
off.
logic.
Okay,
You don't know what a publicly traded
We're
company
already
is. You don't know what
we're already
capital is. You don't know what
at-
funding means. You don't know what
Let me
unlimited
finish.
means.
We're
Nico.
already at the unlimited
Amen,
funding. Like,
Nico.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. So when
Facebook is
Amen.
a utility.
No,
like
no
roads,
self-reflection.
right?
None whatsoever. Don't think about, wait, maybe he's yelling over me because I'm yelling over him. Just keep going. Steamroll. Don't pay attention to anything. No self-reflection.
So he's saying, like,
Facebook's not regulated like utility, if that's what you're asking.
right, but no, but he's making the argument that Facebook is essential to launch a business in the modern world. In the many ways, like roads, like to restrict a business access to roads, we all agree that's BS.
You literally can't
But
find
is
competition.
Facebook is it as essential as roads?
I don't disagree that these platforms have a lot of power. So I have questions about how antitrust works in the United States. A really good question, in my opinion, is why the fuck was Facebook allowed to buy Instagram? That shit is crazy to me. I think that if you want to attack some of these larger social media platforms from an antitrust perspective, that is absolutely legitimate.
And then what?
Because it is really hard to start. Let's say that you're banned from Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. What public voice do you have, right? You're not on fucking Gab.
What?
No offense, I'm sorry, but like, right?
We
You're
agree.
completely fucked. I absolutely agree. But you have to hit this from an angle that makes sense, not this crazy shit about how they have unlimited
angle that-
funding from the government
Hold
and blah,
up,
blah,
hold
blah,
up.
blah, blah,
So
and all the
the
made-up
antitrust
conspiracy.
law-
Wait, Nico, you were just complaining about him. Okay, whatever. Okay, at this point, I'm just gonna stop calling out the interruptions. I might not because it'll just get too much on my nerves. But at this point, you can just assume that Nico's just not gonna at all let better discourse to actually commence going forward. So just, I think I've made my problems with Nico's way of communicating on a basic human level well known.
that are already in place
What you
that should
have
be
to
preventing
say-
these
what you
platforms
have
from
to
doing
say
this
is
because they're
you have to
private.
say we
They're
need to look
literally
at the way our
making deals that
antitrust works in the
control the
United
outcome.
States.
Do you agree?
And then you attack
Nico,
from that angle.
Of
Nico, you gotta
billions
hang on.
of views, and you're like, let's affect the antitrust laws. Well, if you reform the antitrust laws, Destiny, do you know it's going to completely and utterly destroy how we battle monopolies now? You see how fucking ridiculous that
But no,
sounds?
Destiny just
Why don't
said
we actually
that
just-
Facebook shouldn't have been able to buy Instagram.
Yeah, but that's my point. He's like, we should then refund the antitrust laws to make sure that can't happen. But if you reform it, oh my God, then we can't handle antitrust issues like we handle them now. Like, no, that sounds ridiculous. You can, I was about to
You
say something
agree
very
on this.
vulgar, but basically you can do you can walk and chew gum at the same time.
It's not about walking and chewing gum at the same time. You're pointing to things and calling them problems when they're not problems.
You can reform 230 while protecting the things that we.
Okay, what do you want? What do you want to do to
What is it
230?
230 for reform you want?
What specifically?
One, it's either one of two things. You either reform 230 or you admit that platforms like Facebook and Twitter no
How
longer.
would you
Oh,
reform
hold
230?
on, let me fucking finish. Oh my
Every
God.
time
shut
they
the
ramble,
fuck
it's
up.
because they don't have
Bro,
shit to say.
shut up.
Every fucking
Jesus
time.
Christ.
It's like, it's the same
Dog,
script. Holy
if you
shit.
like, okay, you know what?
But one at a time. No, we have to dissect the 430.
Yes, finally, Nico. That's the smartest thing you've said and done. The whole panel. Just leave it there for the rest of it, please, for the love of God.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
All right, Peter.
It's
what do
fine.
you want to do to
have nothing
230?
to say. You can get mad all you want.
You're
I'm sorry
a
that
surgeon.
you have to actually answer a question for once in your fucking life. It's fine. Like, we can sit here and we can cry all day about like, oh, 230
Better
unfair, blah, 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 blah.
You know what? There's really nothing stopping me from hosting an event like this where I host the conversations, I guess. Except for, of course, these things cost thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars to host and promote. And I'd have to cover people's hotel expenses and planes. Okay, so there's a few things stopping me. But if I could, I would.
Blah. Tell us how you'd reform it. Oh, there you go. Go ahead. Pick it
So
up.
like I
Go ahead, let us hear it.
So like I was saying, I want to reform. You can reform it by, one, protecting the benefits that we have now, but make sure that if a company decides to act like a publisher like Facebook and Twitter have done in situations especially that affect the outcome of our political atmosphere, like you can literally legislate it. It'll go through the committee process.
Seriously, if you volunteer to be a mod at this event, I convinced Brian to let you do it. Of course, I'm always up to mod. I would always love to participate in one of these things as well, but like this thing's over, right? It's like, plus I can't fly down there right now. I got finals and stuff. But yeah, sure, next year, why not?
They'll figure it out, make sure it works. Who will be affected? Who could be positively affected? Who could be negatively affected? They go through a process. I don't know if you heard about it, but that's what Congress does.
What does it mean to
And
act
it's-
like a
hold on.
publisher?
Oh my
Okay.
God, bro. Just 5 fucking seconds, bro.
Wait, if I am moderating the debate and I tell people when they just yell at the top of their lungs they need to stop and I mute them, am I a publisher or am I not a publisher? Am I protected by these laws, or how does that work?
Anyway, once we get through that, when we get to that point, we can do a breakdown of what's the best way to ensure that, one, they're not doing it, but even if we can't control them for doing it, make sure that if you're removing someone's literal brand, business, whatever, that you have to go through the same due process as everybody else. But right now,
Do you think if you started early, you could get enough donations to hold one? The thing that would be difficult is that obviously this would be a money sink overall. It'd be probably very difficult because I just don't have the connections to make it a profitable endeavor. And so if I basically make my donation thing just covering that forever, that means I'm going to have to cover the Hippy Dippy Championship belt, which we're trying to like raise money funds for right now. I have to cover all this other stuff myself when it comes to PayPal donations. And obviously I need that money for other things too, to like make the show better. So, I mean, I maybe it'd probably take a year of fundraising, but dude, I can't even, hotel costs and plane tickets too. Not just the like location. I mean, I do live near DC, right? So DC is like the perfect place to host this. But like, if I could somehow do it, yeah. Why not?
They're being shielded from due process and accountability.
Not to mention, if I make the ticket price so high that people can't go there, then what's the point of me hosting the event? So I'd make the tickets probably like something between like $20 and $50. There's no way I would like, maybe we get up to super VIP tickets like at Fear Fest. They were like $3,000, man. Crazy. But there's no way we'd make our money back from that. We could get advertisers, but how many advertisers are going to like advertise at an event like this? I don't know.
Accountability on their behalf, and then we're not getting any
So how
process when we
do
get
we
screwed.
get around that? Peter, how would you, if you're a surgeon, what do you do to 230?
Well, for me, like, these are the two options. Either you recognize that Facebook, Twitter, and all these things are acting as publishers and not as ISPs. Like, this law is actually designed around the relationship an ISP has with the customer, as opposed to just websites. It's applied to websites because websites ostensibly act.
Stay with Hippy Dippy brand and build it. My plan is eventually to make Hippy Dippy grow until we can hold like Hippy Dippy conference eventually. I haven't said this publicly because it's so far out there, but eventually I want to like actually have a Hippy Dippy championship in a ring with announcers, with bells, full Titantrons, and a ring. Like, that's eventually what I want to do. But like, this is stuff I'm thinking about like 2-3 years down the line if it continued to grow. And that's a huge if.
In at least somewhat neutral.
Tickets at this event were $75 to $175. Damn, man. And I'd want it to be cheaper too. I mean, maybe I'd have to hit that price, but I would want my lowest ticket. The idea of having a ticket to one of these events, the most base level ticket be more than $50 would be concerning to me. Maybe it could be like a $50 student discount. Okay, I'm talking about something that's probably not happening anytime soon anyway. So let's get back to the debate.
Way. I think that has been overstepped, and we can either recognize that and apply 230 to them as it exists now, or 230 needs to be amended in order to recognize that.
But how?
How? I can't give you exact wording. I'm not.
Well, what does it mean to be a publisher? That's what I want to know. Because we're saying if you're going to act as a publisher, what does that mean to be a
I thought you were
publisher?
the expert on 230. It tells you in the.
What?
I thought you were the
Yeah.
expert.
Okay. What does it mean to be a publisher?
230 is
Ariel?
like, it's like
Ariel.
27.
Wait, so Nico, so he just says a few things about 230, just like the basic facts about 230, and now he considers him an expert. You know, this feels like when I will like say like basic like Chinese history or like the basic history of like Syria, and then people are like, oh, Dylan, the foreign policy expert. It's like, I didn't declare myself that. You're declaring me that. Like, that's you, man.
7 words. What do you mean? It doesn't tell you in there what it means to be a publisher.
All right.
You could have the stream be pay-per-view. No, I'm not gonna make it pay-per-view. I want it to be.
herd is
I want
a
it to be
herd.
that anybody can at least access the content. I want it to be publicly available online. If I make it pay-per-view, then I don't know. This is not a format that's traditionally pay-per-view. If this was like wrestling or boxing, I could get away with it. But I don't want to be the first one to pull that trigger. You know, I want to die 30. Thanks for the tier 1. Not to mention, our community is super online. That shit would get pirated super quick. Whereas in boxing and like UFC and stuff like that, it's not all like traditionally on-site streaming spaces. So I think it gets pirated a lot less, you know?
He literally just read it. Yeah.
Ariel, what's it mean to be a publisher?
I think that's the issue that this debate is having. I think both people are explaining.
Host boxing events at the same event? Ooh, I don't know, man. That's getting a little bit on the razor's edge. I always wanted to host like a boxing or wrestling event though, or just be involved in one. But I mean, I don't know. That's something I want to do once I get like I retire or something from my work.
Explaining it differently.
No.
Now, is being a publisher simply posting something online, or is it also? Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. Or
Oh my gosh, we could do like chess boxing. Do you guys know what chess boxing is? See if I can. We're gonna watch this later. Chess boxing, right here. So chess boxing is they go in there They play chess, right?
By checkmate on the chess round.
Wonderful, you know, play chess.
Continues
And
to
then they
show
box.
more aggression, while Frank is clearly wary of his younger opponent, and finally goes into a clinch.
So we just do this, but for Twitch debate.
Or is it controlling what's being seen in the world? I think there's a case for both. I think both are equally as important because you could post things like it happens with the algorithm with YouTube all the time. If they don't like what we're saying, they restrict us.
Sure.
And I think that is in essence also being a publisher because you are controlling what is being seen.
Sure. Like Stephen points out that like the New York Times op-ed's clearly like that's a publishing practice, right? But what about on your content if you say something like trans women aren't women, or you said something different about COVID and they said this article is misleading? Like, is that publishing?
I don't think that's publishing. I think it's
editorial content.
I think it's editing. I think it's editing, and I think people can interpret that as publishing. I think it's all interpretation. I think everyone's going to interpret it differently. That's the issue. That's why we have debates about this, right?
What do you think, Stephen? Is that?
I think this is one of those things that seems plainly obvious unless you're taking a hardcore political bent to it. If you have a platform and users are supplying all of the content to that platform, you have a right to moderate it as you see fit. If you want to like force people or attach like a not safe for work or not safe for life link, if you want to say warning, like we think this contains bad bit or whatever, or you want to say that like this violates whatever rule or whatever, you have the right to do that. That doesn't mean that you are suddenly like creating and publishing content on your platform. I think there's case law to support this. The EFF has a huge write-up on how they feel about 230.
Nico House just scratching his chin. These are interesting points. How shall I respond to them? I know I shall yell over him.
And a whole bunch of other institutions have signed on. People
Destiny's giving me unlimited points tonight.
like Medium have signed on to support 230, written as is as well. I mean, like the idea that just because you engage in some moderation, or if you want a front page like the cutest dog pic of the day, you've become an editor or a publisher. If we were to take that point of view, what we're essentially restricting is every single platform has to just show all of their content in a straight line with like no other like flourishes or whatever. Otherwise, you're engaging in publishing or editorializing.
Don't you have to weigh the benefits and
like? So
I think he makes a lot of sense in that. With that point,
because
you are also a business and you want to make sure your business is doing the best that it can, and if that means putting certain content first because that's going to get the best, you know, the more clicks or keep people on the site for longer, that makes sense, and I get why YouTube does that as well. I just think it's reached a point where, to me, it would be considered censorship and not no longer. I think just for me, their line has been crossed, but I understand.
I just don't like the word censorship because like.
Come up with a better word then.
Well, the problem is
I'll use that word.
The problem is that contextually these mean very different things, right? If I'm not allowed to call my dad the F word, if I'm a 9-year-old at my house, I'm being censored by my parents. That is true. Is it good or bad? It's probably okay. If you're not allowed to say crazy stuff in a classroom, if you're like in 5th grade, you're not allowed to scream swear. That's censorship, right? If I'm on a private company, if I were to start screaming at you really big obscenities, eventually I imagine you'd have me removed from the stage, right? That's a form of censorship. Now, if the government were to craft legislation that was abridging my right to freedom of speech, that's also censorship. One of these is really, really, really bad, and the other 3 examples are probably okay things that ought to be protected in society.
So the main issue I feel like is that we're losing the context of is like the consequence.
Destiny advertised this as a 3v1, but then the moderator's working against them too, so I guess it's like a 4v1.
Of the inconsistent application of punishment and censorship and removal of people. It's one thing if I saw like, you know, CNN or MSNBC getting the same type of treatment as maybe an Alex Jones, for example, probably wouldn't be all that concerned. I'm like, well, shit, man, that's just the way it happens sometimes. I would still have a problem with it because I'm a free speech absolutist, but it would be hard for me to find an argument that says they're treating people unfairly and it seems to be based on a political agenda. We all sat through Russiagate. I think everybody was there for that, where they lied, not once, not twice, but for years.
Okay, the thing, I hate this, they lied. They, the nebulous they. What did they lie about? Who is they? Give specifics, right? Because I could just be like, Donald Trump lied, and people are like, okay, like which time? Like what? Like in relation to what? Because there's a lot of stuff. The Internet Research Agency was a real thing. The Russian government did work to spread disinformation within the United States to make Donald Trump win in 2016. They spread posts that got millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of views, like tens of millions of views. in some instances, right? Definitely if you accumulate them. That's one thing. And then, of course, you could look at all of the indictments from the Russia investigation. Or like, what specifically, though? What about the multiple released like FBI reports showing that Russia did try to interfere in the 2016? Like, what specifically about Russiagate? If somebody said something like Vladimir Putin like personally like picked who was going to win the, of course it's ridiculous. Or that the Russia like switched votes. If somebody said that's ridiculous. But like, say specifics, because there is information about Russiagate, quote unquote, right? That was 100% accurate.
It cost people jobs, friendships, breakdowns in relationships, and it turned out to all be complete and total bullshit. And then if you go and look up, like, and you see some of the articles that came out, they were like, they had the CNN employees that got caught saying, yeah, this is BS. Nobody actually believes this. They were doing it for money. That's what their claim was. And the moment that became an issue, like, that was everybody's moment to step back, like, wow, so hold up. Not only were they lying, not only were they full of it, but it was for money, and they weren't punished for it. There is no incentive for them to then tell the truth at any point, because they know that they will always be able to benefit from Twitter, from Facebook, and from the government, as long as the right people are in power and they're doing what the government wants. So you now have this vicious cycle of fuckery that no one is being held accounted for, because they know whatever applies to you doesn't apply to me, as long as I keep playing the people who are in power, as long as I keep playing their game. That's how we're in the shit we're in right now, because of the selective accountability. If I can be held more accountable than
what's
a
the
politician,
accountability?
that's
Like,
a
Peter,
problem.
Dude, I really don't like how he emphasizes like every word, man.
What would you want? What would you want? Like, if there's accountability for these people, like, what is that? What's that look like?
I mean, you can see, if you think that one of these companies has engaged in behavior that is like illegal or malicious, and you can prove that in a court of law, you can take them to court and sue them.
Oh,
CNN has gotten sued. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Did I just interrupt your interruption with my answer to his question? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, thank you. Okay, yeah. So you can take.
That's my favorite Destinyism. It's like when somebody's like interrupts him. It's like, I'm sorry. Did I interrupt your interruption? I'm sorry. And then he just stops talking. It really. If they keep talking, it looks bad. If they stop talking, it looks bad. There's like no way out of it.
Into court if you feel like they've published a story that's wrong. There was a really popular story like 4 or 5 years ago. I'm sure everybody in here saw it. It was like some white high school kids that were outside, and there were, I think, Nation of Islam people. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that family took CNN to court, and they got a decent settlement out of it, which they should have, because that whole story was bullshit.
And
the way that it was edited.
What does that have to do with
Facebook?
Facebook?
What is that? What, you
We're
just
talking, I just said CNN.
I can walk you through it. No, that's fine. If we want to spend the
He's
time.
talking about accountability.
So you said there was no accountability.
No. What I said was
CNN
be sued, MSNBC can be sued, Facebook cannot. What are you talking about?
The only
We're not
one
having the same conversation.
The only ones winning when we're talking over each other is like the echo. So, go ahead. You were gonna summarize.
No, I was just gonna say he's talking about accountability. I think that is one way of people being held accountable. I don't think necessarily I don't think we need to start suing.
Oh, my favorite is, I'm sorry, did the middle of my sentence interrupt the beginning of yours? Oh, that's brilliant. I need to write that down. That's actually really good.
People
Is
to
that
be held accountable, though.
We're talking
to have those people be
we're
held
talking about
accountable.
social media platforms in the inconsistent application of accountability.
Yes.
Like that's so I don't know what you're talking about. I already
Because
said
you brought up CNN.
We already know
You brought up CNN. That's not a social media
because
platform.
I said on these platforms, on YouTube, which is owned by Google, which is owned by the CIA, on Facebook,
Wait. What did he just say?
I already
Because
said
you brought up CNN.
We already know
You brought up CNN. That's not a social media
because
platform.
I said on these platforms, on YouTube, which is owned by Google, which is owned by the CIA.
That's just completely untrue. That's just it's not owned by the CIA. It's not owned. You know what it's gonna be? It's gonna be data sharing agreements. That's what it's gonna be. There's some data sharing agreement with Facebook, or some data sharing agreement with YouTube or something, and that means they're owned by it, which is completely whatever. What is it? How does he own it? Is it the thing we looked at earlier, which shows they're very clearly not owned by whatever the hell he was talking about earlier? The unlimited money, once again.
But it literally is, bro. You can just look the shit up.
Well, no,
No, we did it. It wasn't true.
Fine.
For example,
You think Google is owned? You think Google's owned by the
Look,
CIA?
Bro, I'm
Okay,
not gonna do
all
your
right.
homework for you. You should have did before you got here.
but
anyway,
what I think he's trying to
I'm
say.
sorry you didn't look up my lies beforehand, before I said these lies here.
51%
Nick Sandman
majority stake, or what
successfully
is it?
sued
Say it
CNN for
again.
libel. Nick
Say it.
Sandman successfully sued CNN for libel.
You know what? Google should sue Nico House for libel right now. That's what they should sue Nico House for libel. Take him to court. Get a nice Lord settlement out of him for saying that they're owned by the CIA.
So he's saying accountability is There are methods for this.
Suing CNN for libel isn't CNN being treated like you or I on Facebook or Twitter, which are two of the most powerful platforms in the world that have unlimited sources of
I have a good way of, in my opinion, holding people accountable. I think that people like Facebook, or like businesses and companies like Facebook or Twitter or whatever, should be honest and upfront about their political biases. I think that's one way to do it, because then going in and you're going on these websites, you know that their feed might be tailored a little bit more to people left-leaning or right-leaning. And I think that the Daily Wire does that. They literally say, we are a conservative news source. So people know going in that they're going to be...
But those are all publishers, right? And they all can be held accountable to a degree, Facebook and Twitter. Everything that you're saying is true, but then Facebook will turn around and say, we're not publishers. What are you talking about?
All right, so take an example.
Yeah.
So on Section 230, to modify that, like I haven't gotten a ton of specifics, but Vivek Ramaswamy, I maybe butchered his name, the guy that wrote Woke Inc. What he says to do on Section 30 or 230 is to guide it by the First Amendment. So they would not get liability anytime they're outside of the bounds of the First Amendment. So they can censor content, for example, that the First Amendment doesn't protect.
Dylan, have you seen the very last panel from the event? No, what was it?
Which would be like your child pornography, threats of violence, libel, and all of that. But everything else, they would have to do in the spirit. Or they could choose to be a publisher and lose the liability. What do you think about that?
It's like, it seems weird. It's like paradoxical. Enforcing that a business follows the First Amendment is contrary to the purpose of the First Amendment. This is the reason why anytime you participate in any private business, if you go into any restaurant, if you go into any private anything, there's always that line on the bottom of, we reserve the right to remove you for whatever reason we see fit. Part of your ability to run a private business in the United States is that you can exercise your private level of discretion in any way you want, as long as it doesn't move contrary to, like, protected classes, for instance. You
Bro, I'm gonna lie, that's not like the same argument that was made for slavery.
It's a reason. Was I interrupting your
that's morally bad.
Backstage.
The Constitution, as long as you're private. You're a private company. It's cool.
Nico.
That's exactly what. Yes. Welcome to the First Amendment. That's exactly how it works. The First Amendment does not apply to private enterprise.
The First Amendment has to do with the government restricting speech. It has nothing to do with private corporations.
What the First Amendment is.
People make argument.
Come on. And then did he bring up where did slavery come from? He brought up slavery somehow in there. Dude, I'm sorry. Somebody getting banned off of Twitter for saying the N-word is not the same as slavery or in any way comparable.
Where they pretend as if they could undermine the First Amendment, and then they usually, if everything goes well, get crushed in court later and sued for it.
Okay, so Peter brings up a restaurant is not the same as Facebook. So
not the same.
would a limit? What about a company-sized liability limit that you get protection if you're small enough, but if you're big enough, different rules apply?
Why?
This is like an interesting argument. So again, though, the problem is like there's either two things going on here. Either one, in my opinion, we should be talking about antitrust law, which I think there are way more better conversations to have. Or two, you're essentially saying that once a company grows to a certain size, there's like a whole other set of like constitutional provisions that come in to moderate or guide that company. I mean, you could, but that gets into like a lot of really weird.
It's not a constitutional provision. It's a law. It's just a law. Section 230 is a law.
Sure. I would also argue that
I thought you were mentioning more specifically like the First Amendment stuff.
I'd also argue that quantitatively is not necessarily a good way to figure this out. I think it's really like when you look at Facebook or Twitter or any of that, there's a tiny percentage of posts that they spend their time pushing and boosting or moderating for that matter. I think it's really, are they acting in a manner that like they are very, very heavily curated?
Maybe Peter Coffin's like super like before like these regulations because his girlfriend got banned off of Twitter.
Creating their site in terms of what they boost.
If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. Okay, it's not worth the research.
I have a very possibly. I don't know if this makes complete sense, but to me, I think the argument can like be summed up in like as book burning. Like people are allowed to publish, but then people are denying those publishings to be seen, right? Is that kind of where we're at? Is that what both of you are saying? Yes, people are allowed to publish on Facebook, but is Facebook also becoming a publisher?
They do.
It is worth the research. Okay, if somebody sends me a quick TLDR link, then maybe I'll go into it a tiny bit, but it's not related to this, so I don't want to really.
That would be the book burning, right? Yeah, they allowed them to produce the books, but they're also burning them, right?
Hey,
so they're
Ard
also
Rand, thank you so much for tier 1.
hiding some information from being seen. Is that technically a publisher? I don't know how to answer that. I don't think I don't know if any of us do.
If you are curating information and or what just came out recently, even blue checks, right, on Facebook, they got caught whitelisting certain celebrities and certain political figures and basically blacklisting others. Once again, in the grand scheme, what is that actually doing? That is influencing not only political narratives, but social narratives as well. And it is disallowing open discourse, which is fine if you're CNN or MSNBC or Fox News. Because once again, if somebody is allowed to lie, outright lie about me on CNN and MSNBC, if somebody does that, I can sue them and I have a pretty good chance of winning. If I supposedly pushed a lie about Hunter Biden, which is kind of hard to lie about that guy, but hell, fuck that. Even if I tell the truth about Hunter Biden, I can get banned off of Facebook.
So you're saying these big companies can't be political? Let me finish. Is that your argument?
If I can push a lie about Hunter Biden and get removed, but then Hunter Biden can then log on Facebook, push a lie about me, and nothing happens, there is a problem. And that's what we have seen done consistently over and over and over again. And we keep getting into the weeds about, what about antitrust? There is no difference between addressing antitrust laws in 230s. Maybe we have two different methods of dealing with the issue. Hold on, let me finish. Yeah. We have two different methods of dealing with the issue, and that's fine. We can have those differences. But we both agree that this is inherently a problem. And what I am telling you is the root of the problem is, which is something that you keep ignoring conveniently, is the fact that you're having unlimited funding from the government, prop up countries where there are, companies where there are no competition for that, and then there are real life consequences that are felt because of the government funding that you can't compete.
So too much funding.
There's one person. There's one. There's
look
one
at
person on the stage.
Ariel Scarelli just is like she's tapped out. She's asleep. If you look, you see her finger. She's actually on her phone. She's on Twitter scrolling. Look at live reacts. Wow, I sure look good on the feed.
Have a good solution.
We're blowing up. Oh my god.
Right, I would say, how will antitrust solve the problem? Because I think what you're saying is, let's solve it. How does antitrust solve it?
So the only way to solve the problem the way that you're addressing it is like the Marxist solution, which is you're saying that private companies should have some greater obligation to their public operation. If that's the case, then they need to be owned and held publicly by the government, and then they need to be regulated in that way as a utility. Well, that's the ultimate end goal of what you are pushing for.
You can't get away with shit you shouldn't be getting away with.
Actually,
if you did all your crimes,
is it like a prop bet that he took? How many times did he cut me off?
What's the CIA for? What is the CIA for?
How many times does the CIA?
Hey guys, let's let you know.
How many shares does the CIA own of Facebook? How many shares does the CIA own of Google?
The only word I heard in all of that was CIA.
Overthrow you. No, if you're doing
like the CIA hedge fund or
we're officially measuring.
Or Biden go down to the New York Stock Exchange and execute these trades, or does he send his son down to do it?
Do your dirt out in the open. When you have congressmen threatening Amazon.
Dude, did he really just steamroll into just actually being able to talk here? Okay.
Threatening different companies. If you even
gotta let him make the argument.
Trump, I didn't get to finish making my argument. When you
stopped talking, you weren't done.
Finish, bro.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
I'll let you say all the dumb shit that you wanted to say. Let me finish. So like I was saying, when you have politics.
What do you mean? He didn't even get the. Oh my. He literally didn't let him finish all the stuff.
Who go on Twitter
that's where we're
and then threaten, say, we will use our legislative power to force you to do something if you don't do it yourself, and then without any process, they then get to remove the president.
Finish this argument.
Parler gets removed from app stores, and then no one gets held accountable when we find out, oh shit, maybe we did this the wrong way. Like, politicians shouldn't be able to fucking skip steps in the legislative process and have presidents removed from platforms. That is insanity. There's no justification for that. And why did they get away with it? Because the government...
Honestly, I see Trump getting banned from Twitter as Twitter holding, even though it took him forever, even our own public officials accountable to the terms of service, which I think is actually like a good thing for a public official to be held to the same standard as the rest of us. But I don't know.
Who is allowing the shit to happen?
Destiny.
And as long
Please
as
tell me you have Advo ready. Booksmart quit halfway. Well, I'm not quitting until I'm done with this, but it's painful. We're gonna get through this though. But you know what would make it a lot less painful? Donations and subs.
You do what the government wants, who no one trusts, then you won't be held accountable.
Nico, we're gonna pull the mic in a second.
Like if I get 1 million subs today, okay, I'll buy out Facebook, make it a public entity. Thank you.
Seriously, you finished the argument about your antitrust. How does antitrust? So first, you got the argument that unless the marketing control. So how does antitrust fix it? Finish
So,
your argument.
I mean, like, so I think that you can look at the amount of market share that a certain company owns in an area, and if it's too great, then I think the company needs to be broken up. Now, the problem is I think people try to argue like how broad the areas should be. So I don't quote me on this, but when Facebook took over Instagram, they were trying to make an argument that like, well, we occupy totally different spaces. It's not similar at all, so that's why we should be allowed to acquire them. So, but I think there's like a point to be made that if you want to do if you want to start a company of some kind and you're not allowed to list yourself on Facebook, you could suffer like a real material harm by just not having access to that one platform. If that's the case, that there are no competitors that are adequate to counter that single platform, I mean, if antitrust laws exist for any reason, I feel like that would be the reason they exist, right? That if I get banned off one place, I have no access to this entire market. That seems like a good place
so
to
the
make
obvious
it.
example that at least comes to my mind is in Parler, right? So Parler comes, and they get big enough, and immediately they're delisted off Google Play and the Apple Store, and they lose Amazon Web Services. So it's now I guess you got to create your own internet, right? Because it was before kind of create your own social media. Does your antitrust solution stop what would have happened to Parler?
Well, so the weird thing is that we're getting into we're testing the limits of how like private enterprise could be allowed to work, because cancel culture has reached the point to where like you want to try to like it used to be a long time ago that they would just try to get you banned from one social media platform. Now they want to get you banned from every social media platform. Now they might want to get you banned from social media platforms and like having a domain name and get your the people that host your shit banned. Like it wouldn't surprise me at some point they try to get you banned from like getting apartment people to like lease you an apartment because they don't like you so much, right? I think this is the problem. Now the problem is that all of these things are technically protected like First Amendment rights, but what we're hitting on is like these really weird limits of like how effective is capitalism at allocating resources in society, and then people following through on that. Because and here's
a good question. I mean, fuck. I guess for me, right, when you talk about certain figures, it makes sense that a bunch of companies would all together say, we don't want to host the guy who's saying the Jews are evil and Holocaust is fake and all that. No, we don't want to host that guy. And then all the companies are like, oh, they ban them? Well, we don't want to be the one who still has them. And then they all ban them. And they all universally ban them. It's not that surprising. I mean, no company really wants to be the one that gives them a platform to be able to spread that messaging to more and more people or make money. Nobody wants to fund by the use of their platform these disgusting people. And so I have no problem with a lot of these people being banned, but I do believe that there should be competitors out there ultimately that will basically allow anyone on there. Like, that's why I do think that the Parlers, even if I despise Parler on a personal use level, should exist, because I don't like the idea of there literally being nowhere for them to go. But then that's the question of like, will I ever use them? No. Should those platforms stay in relative obscurity? Obscurity? Yes. Why? Because I think the own way on how that platform works is going to keep it in obscurity. Nobody wants to go on the platform where they see swastikas everywhere and like the N-word like 20 times a day. Nobody wants to do that. Well, sadly, not nobody, but not the majority of people.
the thing that nobody wants to hear. The reason why these platforms are so big is
Careful,
because
Dylan, that's unlimited funding talk. True.
everybody wants them.
Now, when it comes to housing and stuff like that, now I do think that you reach a line where I find reprehensible, because I believe all human beings have rights to has a right to a home. Not every human being has a right to like a Twitter account.
That way. Every single person in here probably has some highly integrated Google device or Apple device where they've got like AirPods that connect to their phone, that connects to their computer, that connects to their fucking email, that connects to their school, that connects to their fucking car.
I love the MySpace. I was perfectly fine with
When everybody
MySpace.
is obsessed with that level of vertical and sometimes horizontal integration, you're going to see these companies get as big as they are.
Yeah.
And that's a problem that like it needs to be regulated. But Nico said something correct earlier, which is that it's really hard to regulate it. But the problem is it's not hard to regulate it because the government is corrupt and bought out and blah, blah, blah.
I didn't say
The
it was
problem
hard
is
to
that it's hard to
regulate. I didn't say it was hard
regulate.
to regulate.
The problem is that it's hard to regulate it because people sometimes don't really know what they want. Another great example is people talk about their invasion of privacy all the time. Our privacy is being invaded. Our privacy is being invaded. Motherfucker, you can like dox somebody by looking at one Reddit post. They're talking about like, oh, like my name is like, Peter Thomas and here's my Facebook account. It's like, bro, you post everything about yourself online. You use all of these services. You give all your information out, but that's because they like the convenience that they get from utilizing these products. So yeah, I agree that these situations are hard to regulate, but it's because people all the time don't know what they want as well. It's really complicated to figure out like how big should
Well, no, people want their cake and they want to eat it too. They want the convenience as well as wanting the privacy. Which I will also say, though, that a lot of people will just like click the I agree button and not really know exactly what they're stepping into because nobody reads it. Now, is that on them? I mean, yeah, that is on them. But I do believe that companies need to be as transparent as possible and not leave it as like a little fine text at the bottom of an agreement that, hey, we are accessing this information. We are accessing this information. You can deny us by clicking this option.
Should a company be? How much reach should it have? Because how much convenience are we willing to get in exchange for some of our privacy,
respond,
safety,
Brian?
freedom?
All right, go ahead.
Like, I feel like that's just kind of like insulting people by saying, oh, they don't know what they want. No, people like don't want to be fucking censored. People on eBay didn't want to like get sideswiped out of literally nowhere.
Wait. Individuals don't want to be censored, but they do want others to be censored. Like, I would hate for my Twitter account to be banned. I would not hate for somebody throwing racial slurs at my significant other to be banned off the platform.
Unlimited funding to Amazon and Jeff Bezos, which is once again what allowed Jeff Bezos to become the richest man in the world after having a failed business model. Like people who were working at Yahoo and were having the time of their life and making cool commercials. Everybody remembers those. Like there was a time where you couldn't even imagine a world where Yahoo wasn't the #1 search engine, and then out of nowhere, once again, Google just, oh man, we just have a better business model by doing the exact same thing as you do, but worse at first. They weren't even as good as Yahoo. But somehow they also ended up making Google Maps because that was also for the government, and that's why most of the world doesn't even allow Google Maps because CIA just uses it to spy on people.
Most of the world?
Hold on, let me finish, please.
Have you ever been to another country before? What?
Yeah, they don't
But why
allow
wouldn't
Google
antitrust
Maps.
help?
Wait, which company?
Have you ever been to a country that isn't in fucking Europe?
So
Yeah, sure. I've been to New Zealand. I've been to Taiwan. Yeah, of course. What do you mean, South Korea? These.
Ooh, I'm trying to convince Kat that Kat wants me to go on vacation, and I don't really like going on vacation because I like working. Or it's not that I like working. I just feel so lazy when I'm not working. And I said the one country I do kind of want to go to is Taiwan. But then she's like, Dylan, that sounds like work. I was like, it's not work. I just want to go to Taiwan.
Bro. like what? Anyway, so like I was saying.
but how does antitrust would help? He was saying that Facebook shouldn't have been allowed to buy Instagram. That would be part of the problem. That decentralizes it more.
Yeah, but
why
then
are
we
you so
have to
opposed?
get to. See, that's the problem. We keep talking about part of the problem. I've already given you the root of the problem. Why was Facebook allowed to buy Instagram?
Okay, but the root.
Because the government allowed them to.
All right, but
Because it served their interests.
That requires us
and
to
who has benefited the most from all of these mergers?
But what?
If you just look at the election.
But what can you agree on? Like,
Wait, in what way did it benefit the government? Like, I guess like a merger that it grows the economy, like benefits the government through that way. But like, does it mean like through the monitoring of the people, or like in what ways did it help the government? Or and like, is there like a show of intent somewhere?
other than like the root is
agree
so
with the
deep in your
antitrust.
thing. We have to tear it all down.
I'm completely
I
honest.
I hear
would
where the
say our
unlimited funding
antitrust
comes from.
laws
That's
have
what I'm
been
curious
shit
about
for
right
a
now.
while. Once we saw the 96 communications bill go through, and then like all of radio and all the companies got basically bought up by the major, four or five companies. Like we knew then our antitrust laws no longer work, but somehow they just keep getting allowed to be played. And so what basically Destiny is asking us is, hey everybody, trust your government to do the right thing.
Well,
How's that working out for everybody so far?
I mean, to be fair, he seems distrustful of the big companies
But then-
buying up and getting too big.
I just don't like
But-
it. People don't recognize where the problems come from. If you don't like the media, if you don't like big companies, I'm sorry, but it's a mirror. It's a reflection of what the citizens want. It absolutely
it's not.
is.
It is not true.
It absolutely
Absolutely
is.
not true.
Who the
You can
fuck
get as mad
believes
as you
that?
want about it.
Let him finish his point. You don't like it. Just wait to
Democratic
say
elected
something.
society, people keep
Like if Destiny, look, if you listened, you heard somebody boo Destiny. Let the boos ring out. If Destiny's saying something really stupid, let him hang himself rhetorically.
like big companies. I'm sorry, but it's a mirror. It's a reflection of what the citizens want. It absolutely
No, it's not.
is.
It is not true.
It absolutely
Absolutely
is.
not true.
Who the
You can
fuck
get as mad
believes
as you
that?
want about it. We
Bro,
live
you
in a
live in like a
democratically
fantasy
elected
world
society.
that
People
you-
keep electing these
I need you
politicians.
to get out for
That's
Twitch
what
and go
you're
talk
gonna
to people. Because people tell you what they want if you go talk to them. They don't want to be censored. Motherfuckers did not like Joe Biden. It's some
You know what? Then I do not want Wingstop tonight. Okay? And no matter if I order it, okay, I don't want it. What I want is healthy food. Okay? But I don't want. Sorry. I'm being facetious.
somehow he is in power. Right.
Facetious? Did I use that word correctly? I think I used it. Admiral Love, thanks for the tier 1. Hey, Hype Train. I appreciate it, boys. Thank you so much.
I don't give a damn who you were. He was the number one
Hey,
target
Mel,
on the
thanks for
debate stage
300
for a
bits.
reason. Because he was the most vulnerable.
the
Because no
birds
one
alone,
liked
though.
him. Nobody. But somehow, some way, he becomes a president anyway. Or who everybody by the end of the George Bush
So wait,
administration
are we
didn't like
doing, like,
George
election
Bush.
was linked to
And then
too? Are you-
somehow, some way, he gets paraded back in front of us. And
Is
everybody's
there
like,
like a-
oh
is
my
there a-
God.
is there a single-
Actually,
is there a single
I
conspiracy
do
you
kind of
don't
like
believe in?
George Bush
Like-
now. We get told what we wanted through.
Yo, what is George Bush's approval rating right now? George Bush approval rating. Oh, I'm actually curious. Right now. I want to know, is there anything on this? I'm looking it up right now, trying to see if I can find anything. George Bush's favorability is pulled 180. Okay, this is from 2018. This is from CNN. 6 in 10 Americans say they now have a favorable view of the 43rd president. 61% of Americans have a favorable view of Bush. Dude, time will honestly make anybody look good. Unironically, you could like scroll out anybody with like enough years and people will remember them fondly. They'll be like, oh, the good old days. They'll just like remember a few good movies from the time, be like, oh yeah, that guy was in charge when that was happening. Like who's somebody that everyone hated? Like, let me think. Who was a person that was universally hated by basically everyone? Like literally everyone. Like everyone united in hate. A recent person. Oh, God. Like, I'm trying to think of some meme from the internet. Nixon through time got, like, basically was, like, reformed as, like, an elder statesman. I'm trying to think of, like, something outside of politics. I'm trying to think like a public figure. Like, somebody everyone hates and then started to like. Charles Manson? O.J. Simpson? Unironically, I think that when it comes to like Charles Manson, public image of Charles Manson has probably improved. As people are like, man, I miss the old serial killers. The ones who didn't like go and attack schools. 100%. Gaddafi, oh my God, there's been a lot of people who have reformed Gaddafi. Same thing true about Saddam Hussein too. Stalin? I mean,
a curd is a curd.
Look at Stalin's approval rating in Russia right now. Mabus RS, thanks for the tier 1, appreciate it.
You gotta let him.
this. Well, you gotta let me.
You can't
finish
play
the damn
tennis
thought.
with one person, man. Like you gotta
I
let
just
him.
want to
Gotta let
finish
him
my
back
thought.
in.
I let them finish their thoughts.
I
wanna
love
be able to
that
finish my thoughts.
Biden won and stole the election with a Republican
I'm not
government,
talking about
with
stolen-
Republican
stealing the
federal
election. That's
judges,
not what I'm talking
with
about.
Republicans looking at every step of the way. Somehow he was
You're
able to get
literally
through
you're
it.
like the tennis guy that's running and hitting your own balls.
Well, shit,
Like,
I can
you
do
gotta-
that. I'm not good. But I'm not talking about stealing the election. I'm talking about you're saying people do. They just don't know. They think and then the government and the private institutions react to what people. No, we know like propaganda is a thing. Like did you read about the 80s? Like Cold War?
Okay,
Nah?
but that sounds like an argument for censorship.
Why would that? No,
Because
no,
you're
no.
saying
Court, when you don't agree with
what
what
I
propaganda
can
is.
then go out and tell the truth about that propaganda. I guarantee you, send me
Okay,
in a
but
room with
what's
Destiny.
propaganda?
Send me in a room with Destiny when he's spewing bullshit. I will tell you why it's bullshit, and you will know the right and correct way to go about solving issues. This is why we have these
The
conversations.
legal guy's a dunderhead, total dunderhead. Not even close.
So, if you could make one tweak, what would you do?
I don't want to
Just
mention
like
it, but
one.
Ariella?
Okay, here it is. Like Peter Coffin, like talking about this. At the Nico pointed out how In-Q-Tel is a literal CIA front, and Stephen Bonnell responded and implied that Nico was unhinged conspiracy theorist. No, you fucking more. He said that the government gives Google and Facebook unlimited money, and this was the example he gave. Facebook has a budget of $46 billion 2 years ago. It 100% has only grown during COVID, and with this meta stuff, 100% has grown. So it's easily like 50 billion plus a year, right? Definitely since it's grown during COVID, right? And Q-Intel has a budget, at least a public budget, of $120 million. And let's say a lot of that budget isn't public. There's no way in hell that it has the resources to give Facebook and Google, two of the biggest companies on the planet with humongous budgets, unlimited money. It was that accusation that people were like upset about, or at least it seemed to be what like triggered Destiny the most. Dude, these people are I'm sorry, This is like every single time I look at some people on the internet. I'm like, dude, the free market of ideas was like a complete fraud. It was completely fraudulent, a complete scam.
Ariel. Okay. There was a suggestion that she hit on earlier that I think would be a really good thing. I don't know if you would legislate it, but at the very least, we should hold everybody accountable to it. I think that when you remove anything from your platform, I think that the ban reason should be publicly stated. That's like one thing that I would really, really, really like. There are some platforms that have done this. There was one Kickstarter or something, I think, where sometimes when they remove like really charged content, even if you don't agree with it, they'll put a video out saying why they did it. I think that would be an awesome level of transparency, so that if we can see stuff is getting removed, at least we know why it's getting removed.
And then we can make the decision if we want to continue supporting the platform.
Sure, exactly, yeah.
So, and then the way to get there would be how?
I don't know how I feel about legislating it, but it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Like if that did go through legislatively, I don't think I could see like it would be really abused or horrible. I think I'd be okay with that. Okay. If it was like a thing where like if you're already a public platform, or not a public platform, but if you're a platform that allows users to post on it and you're going to remove content, at the very least you have to state the reason why.
Okay, but you'd prefer it to be more of a cultural push, but you're okay with legislation.
Culturally, we failed.
Okay.
So
all right,
there's a reason why these platforms are so big.
I have no problem with that. Like having to state why your post was removed. All that, the biggest burden that would mean to Twitter is they probably have to staff more people to look at content. But unironically, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, they need more people to manually review stuff anyway. So like, I'm fine with that.
Everybody wants to be where everybody else is, right? It's why cities are so big. Everybody wants to move where everybody else is. Like no offense, but nobody wants to post on Gab because that's not where all the people are posting. So people will say in one breath, I wish these companies were broken up, or I wish they weren't monopolies. But in the next breath, they want to be able to post and have 300 million users have access to their public messages.
Okay. Well, that's not totally true for Jangles. He lives in the sticks. Where do you, if you make one
It's
change?
actually a similar one to that. I think that they should have to publish how they are judging what they are doing in terms of content. How are they censoring content?
Yeah, that's what I said in the beginning.
Content?
Yeah.
If the model is something that is majority, like much more heavily weighted towards them promoting a small amount of the content, I think that should put them in a different place in terms of their relationship to Section 330.
Okay. Do you feel like they should be more open with their algorithms?
Yes, absolutely.
That's what I said. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think that would solve a lot of problems. And I don't agree with everything Ben Shapiro says, but he did say that he thinks the same thing. That's where I got the idea from. He says that his media companies.
Wait, he said Section 330. Is it 230? I thought it was 230. Wait, they not even. Dude, I don't even want to open that can of worms. I'm just gonna pretend I didn't hear it.
Daily Wire is straight up. We are a conservative news source, so naturally we're going to be a little bit more biased. And I understand that going in. Okay, when I see these articles, I know that that's where their mindset's coming from. They're not claiming to be in the middle.
What does that look like, though?
I'm not sure. We're figuring that out as we go. I think.
But like
it could be like posting like this is your clear TOS, and then like you would like reference like this is banned because it violated 1 subsection 2A or whatever, right?
Okay. So you go, what if you could change one thing, right? I don't know if we could go to the root, but if you could change one thing, what do you change?
I guess you could do the thing where you show why you ban them, but that's not going to change anything. It has to be the accountability. You have to hit people in their pockets for them to pay attention, or threaten them with losing their business.
What does that look like?
So in the case of let's just say Facebook, for example, when they remove like Alex Jones. If they would have given a reason and then say, this is exactly how we got the community, this is what the community guidelines say, this is what he did in this specific instance, and that's what got him banned, and then it turned out that wasn't true, and then Alex could take them to court for that ban, and they could actually feel it, like that would be, but they, obviously they can't, but if they actually were able to get hit in their pockets consistently and often for wrongful bans, that would solve.
So you want a penalty for wrongful bans?
Yeah.
But how do you determine then what's wrongful?
I mean, that's what a court of law is for, if they're doing their job.
Unironically, while I don't know if that's feasible or not, it'd be really funny to see a lot of these people go to court and have to read out like yes, I did say on this tweet that like there should be a non-Muslim Uber service that would be for Laura Loomer, or Alex Jones would be like, yes, I did say about the Sandy Hook, about just watching them like go in court and have to do these depositions, and like 10% of the way through they're like, oh god, this was a terrible idea.
Mr. Moderator. All right, we're gonna have to start getting into our QA.
Okay.
Yeah. We can start the QA.
All right, no, yeah.
Okay.
Start Q&A.
All right.